Regular meeting of the Tinley Park Plan Commission to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Croner, Stanton, Curran,
Here.
Engel,
Here.
Manny,
Here.
Gatto,
Here.
Gray, Augustiniak,
Present.
Shaw.
Here. We have a quorum. Okay, thank you. And we will begin with any communications from staff. Anything?
No, that's
Okay.
the public hearing notice.
All right. So I do have the notices of the two public hearings we have this evening. Look them over, and they look proper and appropriate. So we will move on to approval of the minutes of the October 19th, 2017 regular meeting. Do we have any comment or any corrections or edits on the minutes from the commissioners present?
No.
No? Okay. I do have some, Commissioner Croner is going to be late this evening, but he did offer a couple of corrections on here. I don't believe that there's anything significant here, but just for the other commissioners, I'll read some of them here. Page 17, top paragraph of the minutes, second to last paragraph. It should read, they would commit to coloring the foundation stone similar to that photo that was submitted to the staff report. And by looking at the exhibit table down there, I think that's on point. So, and then the rest of them, I don't think I need to actually read out loud. Barbara has a copy of them, so it will be good. With that, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 19th, 2017 regular meeting?
So moved with corrections.
Second.
Motion, Commissioner Curran, second.
Second.
Commissioner Engel. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, this evening we have two public hearings. The first one is for Studio Q at 17708 Oak Park Avenue. Public hearing for a special use permit. And we can go ahead and proceed. We will. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Move Commissioner Augustiniak, second.
Second.
Second Commissioner Manny. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now, we have the petitioner and anybody else that would like to speak on the first public hearing. They would need to swear you in. Anybody wishing to speak this evening?
She's not here yet. But I talked to her earlier. So
Okay.
She knows about the meeting and being here at 7, so she might just be stuck in traffic or something.
Okay.
Start with staff.
What's that?
You want to start with staff?
I think we can start with staff then.
Yep.
And we'll swear her in when she comes in.
Good.
Okay.
So, as I said earlier, I have confirmation of notice of public hearing, and they appear to be mailed in accordance with state law and village code zoning ordinance. So we'll proceed with staff presentation.
Great. And just as a matter of clarification, last time we went over the procedure for a public hearing, so I put a slide in here if you'd like to go over it really quickly, Chairman.
Oh, that would be great.
You can wait, since she's not here, you can wait till the public hearing if you want.
Yeah. So we can show this again later too if you'd like.
Okay. So as Stephanie mentioned, we've added in the last meeting. I discussed just the procedure for a public hearing. Stephanie put together a little presentation here, or a little list here. So without going through the full order, there's an order of a public hearing. So we can refer back to this if need be.
Okay. And we also put it on the back of the agendas, so everyone should have a copy on the back of their agendas.
That was an excellent improvement idea. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so item number 1 is our public hearing for Studio Q at 17708 Oak Park Avenue. She is requesting a special use permit for a recreational type use, specifically group fitness classes. And we talked about this at a workshop on October 19th, and this is the follow-up to that workshop. This is the public hearing. And just to go over this really quickly for you, we talked about open items last time. Consider conditions related to sound, because with this type of use, we often have shared walls in spaces like these, and concerns about noise from dance lessons or gyms, recreational type uses where you're playing music while you're working out. We want to be considerate neighbors to other surrounding tenants as well as residents nearby. So we typically recommend conditions for sound be placed on recreational uses like this. And also there is a requirement to install a bike rack to provide parking for at least 2 bikes. If you recall, the Legacy Code has not only vehicle parking requirements but also bike parking requirements in an effort to be more pedestrian friendly and bike friendly in our downtown area. This is a photo of the proposed tenant space. It's the space just to the west of Cousins at that commercial center. It's about 177 Oak Park Avenue on the west side of Oak Park Avenue. You can see here Cousins is off to the right of the screen, and Gateway Learning Center is off just to the left there. So she's between Gateway Learning Center and Cousins. At the last meeting, we talked about how the petitioner actually went and talked to the people at Gateway Learning Center and found out that their hours of operation are completely opposite, and they actually won't be operating at any of the same time. So there's no concern with loud music at her business while kids are being tutored at the Gateway Learning Center. So there's no conflict there as far as sound. And then, as we know, Cousins is a bar restaurant establishment. They often have live music there, so they're having their own sounds there, so there shouldn't be any issue with the petitioner's business playing music during their workout classes. Here is a photo looking from Oak Park Avenue. Again, this is the Tinley Center development. There are many different office condos and commercial businesses in this particular shopping center. Here's an aerial view with the petitioner's proposed space denoted by the yellow star here. You can see there's plenty of parking between the main building and Oak Park Avenue, and also some parking around the back. So unlike some of our past special use permit requests, there is not a shortage of parking in this particular shopping center. So parking was not a concern for staff. However, there is no bike parking currently at the site, so staff encouraged the petitioner to talk to the property owner or the association in this case to talk about possibly doing not only bike parking for her unit requirement, but for all of them. One of the commissioners suggested this approach at a previous meeting, and it worked well because we were able to get more bike parking in a strip center rather than just a couple spaces for one tenant. So consolidating the bike parking needs was really an efficient way to complete that requirement. We'd like to see that done at all the shopping centers along Oak Park Avenue. The zoning of the property is neighborhood general. You can see the surrounding zoning to the north is R4. Across the street on the east side of Oak Park Avenue, there's more neighborhood general in that light purple color. Behind that, there's some R3 in the bright yellow. And to the south, R6, and a little bit further south than that, R1. And that's about all I have for the report, unless you would like me to go over the findings of fact. We can do that also after the petitioner's presentation. And if you have any other questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. That would be excellent. So at this time, do we have the petitioner here? Hi there. Good evening. You're not required to, but do you wish to give a presentation to speak on it?
I can. I spoke last time too, but I
Okay.
can definitely come back and say something, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, if you'd like to, you can come up and just have to swear you in.
Yeah.
Raise your hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
So just to kind of reiterate on what I said at the last meeting, basically I decided to open up a dance studio because I have a very extensive and long experience in dance. I've been a dancer since I was 5, and I've been teaching dance since 2006 at various different places. So this opportunity to be able to just give other people a passion who enjoy fitness and who enjoy dance as well, to come to a place and kind of have that environment where they can be in a positive, motivating, and just encouraging place to do what they love, which is first and foremost dance. So also I will have yoga classes there as well. So that will be a part of the fitness portion of it as well. So, but other than that, I do know about I understand that the bike racks are required. So, although I'm not able to personally have the authorization to provide the bike racks, but I will be working with my property manager to make sure that those will be set in place. He is already aware of that right now, so I'm just waiting to get him to get those things together as well. So if there's any other questions or concerns, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Sure. Any questions from any of the commissioners?
No.
Any questions or comments?
Nope.
Okay. So I just had a couple of questions. I don't know that they're necessarily for you, but
Okay.
just to clarify, I know Gateway and Cousins, they were notified, right? And have you had any response from either of them?
No, I have not.
Okay. And I may have missed this, but it's an office or a business condo development. Is there any, were there any raise your questions from the association?
No, no one has called or emailed or came in to ask any questions about it that I'm
Okay.
aware of.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate you speaking there. Okay, and we did not have any objectors that stood up earlier. Do we have any now? Okay. So, final questions from any commissioners? Questions or comments? We don't. Sounds like. Okay, so do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
So move, Commissioner Augustiniak. Second.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Curran. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, public hearing is now closed. So, with that, do we have a motion on this matter?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the village board grant the petitioner, Kenny Grant of Studio Q, a special use permit to allow recreational business use, including group fitness classes at 17708 Oak Park Avenue in the NG Neighborhood General Zoning District. The Planning Commission recommends the following conditions: that the sound shall not exceed 50 dB when measured from outside the tenant space, exterior of the building, or within the adjacent tenant space. Sound shall not cause a nuisance to other tenants, spaces, or surrounding properties. The petitioner will be required to do soundproofing if there are valid complaints regarding noise. That the bike parking for at least 2 bike spaces are provided at the site.
Okay, we have a motion on this matter. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Engel. Could we get a roll call vote?
Curran,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Gatto,
Yes.
Augustiniak,
Aye.
Shaw.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you very much. So the motion there is to recommend to the village board that they approve the special use permit. And that should be at the village board's next meeting.
It would be the 21st.
Next Tuesday.
I'm sorry, you're right. So it would be the 21st.
Got it.
Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you so much.
The next agenda item this evening is another public hearing. This one is on the residents of Brookside, Glen, southwest corner of 191st Street and Magnuson Lane. A special use permit, consideration for approval of site plan, and consideration for recommendation of a special use permit. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing on this matter?
So moved.
Motion Commissioner Augustiniak, second.
Second.
Second Commissioner Gatto. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, public hearing is open. Do we have the petitioner? Anyone who would like to speak on this? Petitioners and objectors? Sorry. Let me rephrase that. Not just objectors, but anybody who would like to speak on this matter, either in favor or just make a comment. If you would please stand up and raise your right hand. You swear that testimony you're about to give is the truth? Yes. Thank you. Okay. So, I again have a blue folder here with confirmation of the proper notice of public hearing and that it is in accordance with State Law and Village Code requirements. Stephanie, you have a presentation?
Yep. Thank you, Chairman. So item number 2 tonight is a public hearing for the residents of Brookside, Glen. It's in the southwest corner of 191st Street and about 80th Avenue. And the petitioner is requesting site plan approval and a recommendation for a special use permit. Specifically, the special use permit would be for a substantial deviation from the Brookside Glen planned unit development, specifically ordinance 2000-006, where they would like to develop a multifamily development, residential development with 144 units. And they're looking to do that in 4 buildings where 9 buildings were originally approved in 2000. They're also looking for site plan approval for this 4-building project. Here is the aerial view of the subject parcel, which you see in white here. Again, this is near 191st and 80th Avenue. To the north of the site, there is some detention. To the east, there's vacant planned commercial land toward the intersection of 191st and 80th Avenue. To the south, there is the pump station. And also in the vicinity, we have existing single-family attached and detached, as well as multifamily across the street. The existing Brookside Place condos exist. And the site is bounded by the ComEd right-of-way to the west, as well as to the east. We have Magnuson Lane, which is essentially Greenway Boulevard as it goes north to connect to 191st Street. And as we'll discuss later, this part of the road will actually be completed as a part of this project. So we'll have the northbound connection to 191st near this project. The red dashed line you see in this graphic is the Wolverine pipeline. So just to give you a little bit of history, in 2000, the substantial deviation allowed 9 buildings of 144 dwelling units to be on this particular subject property. And we retrieved some plans from 2002, and I made a graphic here. You may have seen this in earlier presentations over the summer, but this particular graphic shows that 2000 to 2002 plan on the left with 9 potential buildings. And then previously, the petitioner came before the Plan Commission in May and June of this year to present a 2-building proposal with 72 units per building. And that's the image you see on the right here. So the first request from the petitioner earlier this year was to go from 9 buildings to 2 buildings. You can see the clubhouse in the middle of those 2 large buildings on the right of the screen. The current proposal is on the bottom of the screen here in comparison to that 2-building proposal on the top of the screen. So again, we're going from 2 buildings with 72 units each to now 4 residential buildings with 36 units each. And you'll notice that these 4 buildings also have the clubhouse in the middle. The site's laid out pretty similarly with the exposed parking toward the back of the site or toward the west side of the site. And the buildings push up toward the street, which is Magnuson Lane or Greenway Boulevard. You can see here that those 4 buildings are actually connected by terraces, and the underground parking garage actually runs from building number 1 all the way up the site through building number 4. So there is a semi-underground parking garage connecting all of the buildings in the clubhouse together, and the terrace is actually on top of that semi-underground parking between those buildings. The subject parcel is zoned R6. This is the surrounding zoning in the area. This is an image from the village's comprehensive plan, and you can see I denoted the site in that sort of bright blue box there so you could tell with all the colors. Yellow stands for residential, green for open space, and red for commercial. So you can see the site was part of the comprehensive plan to be residential. And also in this image here, this is from the original 1990 annexation documents where the master plan for Brookside Glen called for condo/apartment in this particular vicinity. You can see also in the area it called for townhomes where there are townhomes today. It called for condo apartment on the other side of 80th Avenue where there are existing Brookside Place condominiums. And you can see various other uses around here, such as the commercial uses that are planned for the intersection of 191st and 80th, where we have current vacant land that is zoned for commercial uses. So just to go over the petitioner's request in a little bit more detail, as I mentioned, site plan approval for the actual plan that they are proposing today that you saw on the screen just a minute ago, and a special use permit for a substantial deviation from the Brookside Glen Plan Unit development to allow for 4 residential multifamily structures with 144 apartments where 9 buildings were previously approved on this property per that 2000-006 ordinance. The third item that they're looking for is an exception to the village requirement for the front yard setback to allow residential structures to be set back about 18 feet to 27 feet. The fourth being a 9-foot exception to the maximum building height requirement within Ordinance 2000-006 to allow the structures at a building height of 65 feet, where 56 is the maximum height allowed. And number 5, an exception of 0.056 to the village requirement for floor area ratio, or FAR, to allow a FAR of 0.656, where 0.6 is the maximum FAR allowed. And that's a new one that we did not have at our workshop based on some comments from the workshop. We did that calculation, and that's included in your staff report as well as in the presentation here a little bit later. So again, this is our site plan, and you can see those 4 buildings and the clubhouse sort of wrapping around the curvature of the road. There is a considerable amount of green space on the property as well, and the petitioner is providing quite a few amenities. One key thing that we wanted to retain from the original 2-building proposal earlier this year was the fact that they were providing all of these luxury amenities for this particular project. And we wanted to make sure that they could keep those amenities with their new proposal. And we were actually able to retain those amenities as part of this 4-building proposal. There's such things as terraces, the clubhouse, the pool, and we have a slide in here showing some more renderings of those types of spaces. Here's a rendering of the buildings. This is looking toward Greenway Boulevard or Magnuson Lane. This picture does need the road added to it, but just to give you an idea, you can see sort of how this wraps around the curvature of that street. And this is the back of the building, so this would be facing the ComEd right-of-way. And this is the main entrance for the residents, other than through the parking garage, which they would be parking underneath the building. We wanted to show you the parking breakdown as well. There are 171 garage spaces under the buildings and terraces and clubhouse. There are 125 exterior spaces, and there are 64 land bank spaces, which is what you see with the red outlines here. The petitioner will actually be constructing those 64 spaces with the red outlines if there is a need for those spaces. So they've planned in here to meet the requirement of 360 spaces, which is 2.5 spaces per dwelling unit per the village code. However, they don't anticipate actually needing all those spaces, and they'd rather leave green space than put all of this parking that's not going to be used. So the village, as well as the petitioner, will make sure to monitor the parking at the site. If there becomes a parking problem with the spaces that they are going to put in, again, they have room to utilize these land bank parking spaces and actually build those as they need them. And staff will work with the petitioner to try and construct the spaces that are least intrusive to the neighbors first, rather than some of the ones you might see off to the left side of the screen here, closest to those townhomes. We would help prioritize which ones would be constructed first to meet those needs. We also want to talk about traffic quickly. The village engineer reviewed the traffic because we know it was a concern of the residents in the area that there would be more trips generated from this development. It's important to note that this was master planned for this amount of density at this site. So the roads were built anticipating the need for this new traffic from 144 units here. You can see on this slide here, there will be a connection at 191st when they build that road, Magnuson Lane or Greenway Boulevard north through this development up to 191st. And they used the Institute of Traffic Engineers guide to project traffic volumes. And they said the intersection of Greenway and 80th currently has 380 daily trips. And with this development, it would have 410 trips. And then Greenway at 191st, where that new connection is going, currently has 0 trips because the road doesn't go through. And this would actually take on 960 trips according to this study. So that would become a major point of people getting to the intersection of 191st and 80th by going north along there. So that's going to be a really beneficial addition to that neighborhood to have that new connection because it will be highly utilized. Just for comparison, they also noted that the east side of Greenway at 80th Avenue gets 840 trips. So again, that new intersection would be projected to have more trips than the current east side of 80th Avenue. We also wanted to note on here that there are exterior dumpster enclosures. These will actually have the same building materials as the rest of the residential structures, and they are located where you see those red circles on this slide here. The development also has interior trash rooms, so the residents won't be bringing their trash actually out to the enclosures. The management company will do that through the trash room. It'll be a clean operation, I'm sure. We also wanted to note the distance between the proposed structure, Building 1, the southernmost building, and the existing townhome. It's just about 200 feet between corner to corner here. I spoke a little bit earlier about amenities. You can see on here there are some proposed renderings or conceptual renderings of what those amenities might look like. Amenities include a semi-underground parking garage, a 5,320 square foot clubhouse with a fitness center, locker rooms, billiard room, lounge, office, party room, and free Wi-Fi, to name a few amenities. An outdoor pool with cabanas, a fire pit, and seating areas. Outdoor terraces with grilling stations that will have plumbing, so they will have a sink. Seating areas, fireplace or fire pits, a pergola, green roofs. Something I didn't mention earlier is that the first, 20 or so feet of the terraces will have landscaping, so you actually won't be seeing the activity on the terraces from Greenway Boulevard or Magnuson Lane, because there'll actually be sort of a green buffer on the top part of that terrace. So a lot of that will be directed to the rear side of the terrace or the west side of the terrace. There will be outdoor gaming areas, bike storage, electric car charging stations, disc golf baskets, outdoor exercise circuits, fireplaces and fire pits with pergolas, open space, and a dog park. So here are some other conceptual renderings of what those might look like. And just to note, originally with the 2-building proposal, the dog park was on the south side of the site here, where you see actually on the left side of the screen, and they moved it based on the comments from the last meeting to the north side of the site, so it's not near those existing townhomes and single-family residential homes further south. So it ends up being a bit smaller, but I think it'll be a good resolution for those concerns from the dog park and the noise and the barking. Here are some of the elevations. This shows the brick that they're using. And it is a 4-story building, but you can see on here, it's actually only 4 stories in the center portion of the building. And staff wanted to note that we really liked the tall floor-to-ceiling windows and the taller ceiling heights on the original 2-building proposal, and so they actually kept that for this proposal. And the end units on the 3rd floor actually get those same floor-to-ceiling windows as well. So we thought that was a great amenity to not only have the top floor with those big windows, but also have some of the units on the 3rd floor having that great amenity of the windows. The building has articulation with the building face, as well as a nice hip roof that adds some character to the building, almost sort of a prairie style look, but modern as well. And you can see here off to the side that terrace. They showed here on this elevation some of the plantings there, so you can get an idea of exactly how the planting will look from the street, so you won't just see right into the terrace seating area or the fire pits. You can also see from these elevations that they are going to be berming up the ground around the foundation. Now, by no means does this show the proposed landscaping. This is just really to show the form of the building and a little bit of the landscaping. So there will be heavy foundation landscaping around this, as well as the berming that you see here around the base of the building. And this will kind of give the look of that parking really being more semi-underground rather than just being another level of the building. Here is a sample of the proposed railing for the balconies. So switching back to this, you can see those units all have balconies as well. And here's what they might look like. And here are the proposed building materials. Now tonight they did provide 2 different foundation materials. You can see on the bottom of the slide here, the more gray color and then the tan color. When looking on the table here, I think it's easy to see that the tan color is more complementary to the brick, in our opinion. So we left that on the table there for you all to look at if you'd like to come down and take a look at the samples. You can see also in the top left of the screen, they're proposing a precast thin brick embedded into a concrete panel. It will have vertical seams, so you won't see the lines of the seam necessarily on the building. And it is a very durable product. And if you've got questions about that particular product, I'm sure the architect would be happy to answer any questions you have. And lastly, with the review here, not with everything, we looked at the proposed sign. It meets all village codes, and they will be using materials that match the base of the building and the brick on the building as well. So it'll be in character. They are proposing 2 signs at each of the entry points. So we had some open items last time, and the first 3 are considering those exceptions. So that's something for the Plan Commission to discuss tonight. The 4th is revisions are required on the landscape plan, which the petitioner has said they will resolve prior to the building permit release. They're willing to meet all the village's codes for landscaping. So we'll go through that in detail with the landscape architect as the project moves forward. Number 5 was information is needed about the plans for security and management of the property. That's been resolved. Number 6 was lighting. They got us a new photometric plan and some cut sheets of the fixtures, so that's resolved. Number 7 is revised elevations to include the reddish-brown brick rather than the previous tan brick that you see in the staff report, and that's been resolved. And number 8 is provide a material sample for the foundation of the building, and that's been resolved as you see the updated sample here today. So just to go through those open items in a little bit more detail for you. The exception for the front yard setback. This is a tricky one because the R6 zoning district requires a 25-foot minimum. Now keep in mind this is minimum, and then the urban design overlay district requires a 20-foot maximum. So there's no way to meet both of those requirements because one is a 25-foot minimum, the other is a 20-foot maximum. Again, the urban design overlay is put in place to basically encourage buildings to be closer to the street, have more of an urban feel, have that presence of the buildings near the street. And so that's why it has a maximum rather than a minimum. The proposed setbacks meet the intent of both of these regulations because they span from about 18 feet to 27 feet. So we believe that they're meeting the intent of both of those codes. You can see the front yard setback area highlighted in red in the graphic here. Open item number 2 was the exception for the building height. And this was interesting when we studied it a little bit more. Basically what we found out is when you compare this particular project to the existing Brookside Place condos across 80th Avenue on the east side of 80th Avenue, they will essentially appear to be within inches of the same height from afar. And that's because this particular property is actually about 10 feet lower in elevation than the Brookside Place properties, even though this building will be 10 feet taller or so. Since the ground is physically lower, you sort of have that equilibrium of the building height and the elevation really evening out. So it's going to appear to be about the same height when you see it from, 191st Street or 80th Avenue, wherever you may be driving by. So as you can see here, what they're requesting is the mean roof height of about 65 feet, and that's how we define building height, even though the maximum overall height to the very peak of the structure is just over 72 feet. So that's consistent with the regulations you see there. And again, we've got all that elevation information in the table if you have any questions about it. And here is another thing we wanted to point out. One of the proposed buildings is on the left here, and one of the existing Brookside Place buildings is shown on the right here. So the building is a little bit larger because it is 36 units rather than 16 units like the building on the right that exists today at Brookside Place. Something interesting is that the first floor for the proposed project is 14 feet, while Brookside Place is just under 11 feet. So the ceilings are taller on the first floor. Typical floor is still, about 8 inches taller in the proposed building. And then the top floor, because of those large floor-to-ceiling windows and the amenity of having such a taller ceiling, actually gives it another 5.5 feet on the top floor of Brookside Place. So staff sees it as an amenity that the building is actually going to be taller like this. And again, it's going to appear very similar when you see it from afar. Open item number 3. At the last meeting, we discussed floor area ratio, and there was some question about whether this project met the floor area ratio. We studied not only this building, but also the 9-building plan and the existing Brookside Place development, and we found that this building plan is actually the closest to meeting the requirement of 0.6, rather than any of these other plans that actually come in closer to 0.9 in most cases. So you can see here that the proposed plan is the lowest floor area ratio and meets that a lot closer than a lot of these other plans. If they were to do the approved 9-building plan, it would be approximately 0.9, and Brookside Place, as it exists today, is 0.87, 0.89, 0.94, and 0.89. So again, this is much lower floor area ratio than the other existing developments, and the requirement is 0.6. So you'll need to consider an exception for the floor area ratio as part of this project. Item number 4, we talked about the landscape plan, and they're willing to meet all of the appropriate village codes for the landscape plan. This is the last version of it. There were still some outstanding items here, but one thing to point out is the very heavy landscaping they're proposing between the property and the existing townhomes there. You can see there's a lot of evergreen material there, and we will continue to work with the petitioner and their landscape architect to ensure that we're very well buffered in that area, because they want to make sure to be good neighbors and separate themselves in a nice aesthetic way with landscaping from those other existing properties. Open item number 5 was security and management of the property. And the petitioner provided this table of information with her research on what other similar properties were doing as far as security and management. And in the staff report, we outlined what their proposed management and property maintenance plan would be. Let me flip to that really quickly here so I can give you the specifics. And it will be on-site property management from Monday, Friday to 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., Sunday 12 p.m. to 5 p.m., and 24/7 on-call property management as well. Open item number 6 was lighting is required near entrances and exits. The petitioner provided an updated photometric plan at the last meeting, and they have added the lighting at the entrances of the buildings and provided cut sheets for those lighting elements. The next open item was adding reddish-brown brick to the accents on the clubhouse. As you can see here, they originally had it in beige brick, which is the white brick you see on the right of the screen. We wanted it to match the rest of the buildings using that red and brown mixture of a brick. And they did that at the last meeting as well. This particular rendering shows it looking kind of striped. It's not going to appear like that. It'll be that same red and brown brick sample that you see on the table in front of you. And this is the clubhouse. They also needed to revise the other elevations to show the reddish-brown brick on the clubhouse. So here are those other views. You can see again all the buildings match with the brick color. And the open item number 8 was providing a material sample for the foundation of the building, which they did here today. We noted that on this particular image you see on the screen, there's kind of a variety of colors, and we thought about it some more. We thought it might be a little busy to have this much of a variety, and so the petitioner brought 2 different samples today. The most compatible probably being this beige one that you see on the table here. I think it gives a good contrast to the mortar in the bricks that you see with that red brick sample there. But it might be a little much to have quite this much color change in the actual staining of the material, but that's something for the Plan Commission to consider when reviewing the foundation material sample here.
There's another one down there, they're very heavy, but the other one is more of a cool gray. This is more of a warm beige tone.
So this is what they originally proposed, and it looked more almost like a split-face block, so we wanted to see a little bit of color added to it. And these are the 2 that they provided today. So just so you see on the screen there, the one on the table is the picture on the right, and we do have that more grayish color if you'd like to see it. So with that, I can leave you with the site plan up here on the screen while I go over some of the other Plan Commission workshop comments. If that's all right. We had some comments from the commissioners as well as some of the residents in the audience last time, and I just want to go over those so we have answers from the last meeting. So last time we talked about all of those open items, as well as we wanted some clarification about this being an apartment project, and this is a multifamily project, and the petitioner clarified it will be apartments. The second item was the floor area ratio. We already went over that, and there's some in-depth explanation in your staff report about floor area ratio, and those calculations showed that they were just above the floor area ratio requirement of 0.6 because they're at 0.65599, which rounds up to 0.656. There was a question about whether they need a deviation from that 2000 ordinance for constructing multifamily instead of condominiums. And in our report, we mentioned that condominiums are considered multifamily units. However, the ordinance references condominiums throughout the ordinance, and the petitioners clarified that they're constructing apartments for rent and not condominiums. The projected property taxes are about $350,000. The projected cost for the development is about $30 million. The construction traffic will be determined by the village engineer. We will work on an appropriate route for the construction traffic, and it's anticipated that that will be via Magnuson Lane at 191st Street, so that new connection that will be made to the north. There's more information about the developer on their websites, and I'm sure they'll present some as well tonight. And the village will require a letter of credit for the public improvements, and we require all contractors to be licensed and bonded prior to releasing a building permit. There was questions about whether the petitioner would add more electric car charging stations, and they provided follow-up information stating that if they see a demand in the future, they will provide additional electric car charging stations, but will not be increasing the electric car charging stations at this time. And the fumes for the parking garage will be mitigated by adhering to the village's mechanical code and will be designed with different intake louvers and exhaust fans that'll be automatically turned on when the carbon monoxide levels reach a designated level. And there was also a question about the pond to the north of the property. The pond is not owned by the petitioner, and staff has met with the responsible party, and they are aware of the requirement and are working to bring the pond up to code. And other than that, I've got draft findings of fact if you'd like me to go through those later at the meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Before we move on to the petitioner's presentation, do we have any questions from any of the commissioners on the details of the staff report?
No questions.
Okay. I have a couple here. And if these are, let me take a look here. Some of these might be for the petitioner, so I'll wait until their presentation. All right. So clarification of the point, fair to say that landscaping, drainage, and some of these other items here would generally be part of the staff review permitting process. So there were a lot of questions about items of that nature. I just want to make sure that that's all covered in the staff review. There was a question about carbon monoxide detectors as well. That's part of the
Building Tamla.
There was a question about ground sampling for the building of the road, and I did not see that in the staff report.
Engineering.
Again, it would be covered under the engineering review. Okay. The traffic, if I heard correctly and saw in there that the Magnuson Lane would be completed northbound to 191st, and construction traffic, in the report it said traffic would be anticipated to go that way. I would speak for myself and ask the other commissioners to give opinion. I would prefer that it be required to go that way.
It's a county road, so we have to get permission from the county.
Magnuson, is it?
No, the 191st.
Okay. What would that have to do with the direction of the construction traffic?
We're going to take it off 191st onto Magnuson, which is not a public road yet, because that still hasn't been accepted.
Oh, I see what you're saying. The accessing the county road.
Right.
Okay.
Right, rather than coming down 80th and
Okay.
coming
So,
down Greenway Boulevard.
so assuming that the county gives permission for the construction traffic to go through there, my point is, rather than we say it's anticipated it goes that way, assuming that the county gives authority, my preference would be that all traffic is required to go that way, not just
Yeah, that was
preference.
the preference the last time around as well.
I just want to make sure we're clear on that point. Okay, so I had some other questions that would be for the petition. Okay, so with that, I believe the petitioners have a video. Is that, they want to show that at the end of the presentation or at the beginning?
At the beginning. Sure. You want to set it up a little bit, Steph? Tell them what it is? Or you?
Yeah, so this is just a video clip from...
You might want to go there.
Okay.
Introduce yourself.
I am Carly Mayer, the petitioner, and this is a video clip that we saw on ABC 7 News maybe 3 or 4 Saturdays ago, and it just talks about suburban apartments and what's going on, so we thought if it works. So we thought that video. We thought that video clip was interesting to start our presentation. It kind of goes along the lines of what we're proposing. And we're happy to be back in front of the commission again tonight. We've gone ahead, as Stephanie went through, we answered all the questions that were brought up last time. And we're here to answer any more questions that you guys might have. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, and he's going to talk a little bit more about the project and answer those questions a little bit more thoroughly.
Thank you. Thanks again for your time tonight. Stephanie did a fantastic job with the staff report, so I'm going to try to go through this rather quickly, but certainly if there's any questions you have, we have the architect, we have our team here to answer any questions you might have. And we'll just jump right into this, I hope. Okay. Basically, our team, we have Scott Shelvis from Shelvis Group Architects, myself, landscape architect for the project and land planner. KDC has been retained to do the engineering when we get to that point. I know that was one of the questions that came up quite a bit is the concerns about the landscape details and the engineering details. That's all stuff that we have to do by code. So that's something that we will get into with staff at the appropriate time. We didn't want to assume we were going to be approved and just jump right in and get all our final engineering and landscape done, but we are very aware of those ordinances, and we certainly have every intention on meeting those. Again, I think Stephanie kind of hit all these points. The height was a concern. Again, I think the biggest thing there, the biggest takeaway we've come to realize with this is that basically by starting 10 feet essentially lower in relative grade out on the site, that these buildings essentially will be within a foot of the buildings that exist out there in the existing Brookside Glen development. The setbacks, again, kind of a double-edged sword, as I think Stephanie did a great job of trying to clarify that. It's a difficult thing where basically the underlying zoning and the PUD typically would have you push the buildings one way, and the overlay district's telling you to push it back the other way. So we tried to meet the happy median between those two, working with staff, working with the residents in some of the meetings we had. We tried to get to what would look best in the field, and that's kind of really what it all came down to. And then last time the question came up about FAR, I think Stephanie again did a great job of pointing out the fact that this is less than what the FAR would have been had we come in with the 9-unit original plan. And I think part of the, again, when you go to a PUD, it's really not one of the, it kind of gets superseded much like underlying zoning does. So it really wasn't but a big concern, but it came up, so we wanted to address it for you. And I think if there's other questions, we can get into that as we go on. Again, we came in with the 8 buildings initially. We came back to you with the 2-building configuration that we had a lot of resistance to. So we took a step back. We met with the officials, met with the residents, tried to come to a plan that we could get much closer on. At least we feel that we're there, and we really are excited about not excited about the painful process maybe, but I think we've come to what we all feel is a better plan for the site. Again, just the general surrounding, the land uses, I'm not going to go into that. Some of the goals that we had for the site, some of the goals we found were the same as what the village would want, to provide quality infrastructure and promote amenities to assure long-term viability. And I think the clip that you just saw further illustrates that we felt very strongly about why this is a good market for this product, and we certainly are only wanting this to be extremely successful. We wouldn't be here otherwise. To create additional housing opportunities, there's a demand that's not being met in Tinley Park for apartments. That's why we're here with this product. By being able to reduce the number of buildings, putting a large portion of the parking under the building, we're able to actually increase the green space, which was something that staff wanted from day one, and we tried to work with them to maximize that as much as possible. That also allows for the additional amenities on the site, which we feel is a big selling point for the product, and then to produce positive economic impact for the community. And I think, again, that clip we just showed further illustrates that, but there will be, the more people that come to Tinley, they will learn that Tinley's a great place, and they do want to stay here, and they do want to put their roots in here and stay in Tinley. Again, this is the overall site plan with the 4 buildings, the dog park to the north now, a larger open green space park to the south. And again, this is representative of the landscape requirements. We actually have gone through and put in the foundation plantings that are in there. Again, they're not shown in a lot of the renderings because we wanted to see the buildings. So in terms of those, it's kind of a trade-off, but we definitely understand what the landscape ordinance says and will be abiding by that. Again, proposed street view minus the street, but this would be looking northwest along Magnuson/Greenway Boulevard. This is looking kind of directly at the clubhouse elevation. And again, some of the things we are anticipating and will have in that clubhouse area or fitness area, nice meeting spaces, upscale materials and quality of fit and finish, the pool area with the cabanas, just again, something that let's set this thing apart from the rest. So we kind of, and these are the roof decks that are essentially the areas between the 4 buildings. And you can kind of see it in the lower right-hand part of the screen, the green roof area, which would actually have more vertical plant elements to it than is shown there. But to give you an idea that that first 20 feet of that roof deck area is actually going to be green space. It'll just be elevated above the green space below. So again, further make this a unique development, as well as kind of buffer those views from the actual street. Again, the fire pit areas out. These are the fire pit areas that are out behind the buildings, the west and southwest side, between the buildings and the parking lots. These would be improved, much like what you see here with a overhead trellis or a pergola, and then fireplace area with some nice seating, place for people to go out and enjoy. These will also have sinks out there as well, so that there's water out there so that people who are in there can go out and don't have to bring out water or whatever if they're grilling or whatever. Electric car charging stations. I know there was some back and forth on this in terms of how many do you provide, how many do you need to provide for in the future. And I think what we decided is that we're going to provide what we had come with originally, and then also allow for expanding that in the future as demand predicates. And I know that many places I've gone around the Chicagoland area, you see a lot of these stations are starting to show up everywhere. They're still not utilized a lot. So it's kind of a catch-22, but we're definitely going to allow for expansion of those in the future as demand warrants. Bike storage indoor. Past concerns, the dog park relocation, I think we went through that. The elevators, this goes back to the original petition that we came in with, and there was concern because those buildings were much larger. These will all have 1 elevator per building. We originally came in with the 72 unit buildings. They were all going to have just 1 elevator, and then we're going to add 2 elevators to those buildings. Since the buildings have split up now, we basically come back with the same number of elevators, just in 4 different buildings. And the rules and regulations, that was one of the things that came up, and we are going to have the minimum of 1-year leases. I know that was a concern. And then also any village ordinances that would apply to anywhere else in the village will also apply to this development. So people picking up after their animals, leashing their animals, noise, any of those kinds of things are all applied here and would go through the same process as they would elsewhere in the village. Again, the distance from the nearest resident, roughly 200 feet. The building heights, again, I think I touched on that at the beginning, where basically because we are starting out at a lower mean elevation, the visual perception of that from the distance will be that they're roughly the same height. Building materials, this was, I know, something that came up early on, and we're proposing here is allowed by village ordinance. We're not asking for any variations from the building code. It's a pre-manufactured concrete with a actual embedded brick, so it's actually the clay embedded brick within that concrete. The beauty of this material is that it's actually a sturdier and far superior product when it comes to wear and water infiltration and just strength. So, and then Scott, our architect's here to answer any questions specifically on that you might have. Again, the lighting, that was an issue that had come up earlier. I know Stephanie mentioned too that we have resolved that. These are samples of the fixtures we're anticipating. Again, once we go through engineering staff review on the micro level with that, any adjustments that we need to make, we'll be working with staff to make sure that those all comply in terms of the photometrics as well. Summary of the open items. I don't know that there's anything here that I haven't touched on already. And then these were the concerns that from the previous Plan Commission and the workshops. I think we've touched on all of those so far. I believe Stephanie stated them all correctly in her report. I don't think, and this was the, we included this in case we didn't get the sample in time, but we were able to get the sample as well for a stone patterned precast portion of the building facades. Before, I think the previous sample that I know was pointed out and was not seen favorably was more of a cracked or exposed block type look. We did talk to the precaster and found out that this is one of the options we can go with, and that's what we're intending to do. From what we've heard tonight from staff is they prefer the tan version versus the more gray version, but again, we can work with staff to meet that requirement. And then the floor area ratio, I'm not going to go through this again because I think Stephanie adequately and more than adequately explained that, but if there are any questions regarding that, we'll be happy to answer those. Deviation from the condo versus multifamily, again, I think that was something that, again, was pointed out that from a land use planning perspective, condominiums and apartments are both considered multifamily. We're not looking for, that's not a change in the plan for this property. It's always been noted as condos/apartments, and we are here with a apartment proposal tonight. And then the property taxes and the cost of the project. Construction traffic, as we just heard, we'd like to make sure that that goes to the north. We're in agreement with that. It'll be signed as such so that we get the construction traffic going out. I believe that, and I'm not sure how that'll work in terms of will that final lift get put on that roadway probably after construction so that it's not trashed during construction. So that's typically how it's done. You put in the base courses and you put that final lift on after construction traffic's gone so that it, when it gets turned over to you, it has the best finish possible. Again, and then there was some question about the developer background, and if you have specific questions for Carly, she can answer it, but she just wanted me to show you some of the products they've done around the Chicagoland area, and I'm not going to know exactly where these are, Carly, so if you need to, or if somebody has questions about the specifics of them, Carly will be able to answer that for you. But I think what we wanted to show you is just the quality of the construction and the longevity of the company. The company's been around in different forms for quite a while, so there is the experience there to construct a project of this magnitude. Fumes in the garage, I think that was adequately addressed, but basically, yes, it's going to have to meet any of the safety and or building codes that apply, so there would need to be venting of that garage area so that when the CO2 level gets to a certain point, fans kick in, it's ventilated. As those levels are reduced, then those would turn off, and that process goes on as needed, pretty much as you would have in any closed parking garage. you probably have ever been in. Detention on the north side of the project, again, this is not on our parcel, but we understand the concerns. And it sounds like staff is in contact with the original developer of the overall project, and they are responsible for maintaining that. And I believe the staff is working to bring that into compliance. Again, just the overall site plan and the elevation, and then we're here for any questions you might have. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Was there anyone else from the developer who wanted to speak? Okay. Great.
Can you do me a favor? Hang on to that for a second.
I
Go
can
back
hang on.
about 6 slides to the projects that,
This one?
that one right there. Lower right-hand corner. The stonework that's around the front door, is that actual stonework or is that a
Yes.
material? Because that looks closer to what was originally proposed in our staff report. I'm not an architect. I'm not a exterior designer. But to me, that just looks like cinder block, old cinder block that's thrown together. What we were originally shown when we looked at this was this multicolored stone, similar to what you've got right there in the home there. Understanding that that's real stonework, but it sounds to me that that company who provides that could probably put together a product like that. It just looks more upscale than what that does right there. I mean, that looks like a 1920s, 1910 basement.
Well,
block.
yeah, and it's hard to show on just a 2x2. You can't get much of a pattern with it. And it's going to be covered up heavily with landscape.
Understood, but there's still going to be a lot showing until the landscape grows over it. And that's why I think the commission originally was more at ease with.
Staff had looked at that, Peter. One of the concerns we had, because the brick is multicolored on the left, it really gets busy when you're trying to do multicolor on the foundation. So staff actually steered them to a solid color. But it's not like the split face block because of the pattern. If you can go back to the pattern, it's not a straight block pattern.
No, I
It's
understand,
got
but look at
various
how much was that house in the lower right-hand corner? $500,000. How much was that house, a ballpark? Do you remember?
Yeah, like $600,000.
Okay. You see the multicolored brick there, Paula? In that
I actually
house?
think it's very busy. I don't.
Okay,
personally,
but I
don't
mean,
like
somebody
that
paid
together.
$600,000 for that house.
Right,
And what I'm
but
saying is,
painting this also has a maintenance issue. That's our other concern. If you
Excuse
paint
me?
this, because they would have to paint this.
well, but I'm not saying that you have to have as many colors as in here, but you go to something like this, this is more upscale than what that is there. This front on the house that you're looking up on the screen there.
Yeah,
It's a different product type, though. That's a single-family house compared to a multifamily building. So
and that's
change.
true stone. I mean, we just felt that this was, from an aesthetic point of view, from my design background, I think this is more aesthetically pleasing than running into multicolors that actually get painted on, because now
Yeah.
you're having an issue of maintenance long-term.
And I think too, it is, you wouldn't do stone on a foundation type situation, which is what the lower portion of this building is, because that's the
Then why would you
building.
submit it like this?
Pardon me?
Why would you submit it? Why-
It's architectural rendering.
well, but still, you're the one who submitted it, guys, not me, not staff. You submitted this. This is what we had 2 weeks to read, or a week to read into before last meeting, and 2 weeks to sit on, because at the last meeting, you committed to putting this here. First, you said you would consider it, then I asked you, okay, you've considered it, now would you commit to doing this in the foundation? You looked around at your team, and you said, yes, we would.
Right.
But then, let me finish, but then you come back with that. That's where I've got an issue.
I picked that up today. I mean, they have to make those special, so I could get it painted, but it would take another couple weeks. We only had 2 weeks to do it. I picked that up at 1 p.m. today in Aurora, fresh off the press, so. I
Yeah,
mean,
I think some of that too, as we pointed in the one rendering, it's illustrative. The one that comes out kind of looks like a stripe. Unfortunately, that we're still not technologically able to really depict what the true color tones are. Depends on where you print it, depends on what.
Right, and we're not asking for anything that's a variation from the ordinance, or in the code, so.
No, but if you give a commitment, I mean, this is one of the problems we had the last time you guys came out. You made all these commitments, and then when you came back, you fell short of the commitments. So I'm not here to pick on anybody, I'm just showing you that if you make a commitment, that, yes, this is what we're going to give you because this is what we showed you. This is the architect rendering what we showed you. And you make a commitment in a public forum like this to a commission like this, you should stand by it.
And we said we could paint it, we didn't have time because we only had 2 weeks to get it painted.
Well, staff also directed you. I mean, staff directed them to go to the monotone, because we do feel that it looks better as a monotone color. If you kind of look at some of the renderings, even on the smaller scale, it's really hard to detect whether those are multicolored or whether they're one.
This
one
photo,
tone.
this drawing, and so I'm gonna leave it at this. This drawing clearly shows multicolor. This is what we were
Right.
given. This is what was committed to. So.
Right. But the
Let
brick
me
is
ask,
shown, the brick
just-
in this case is not the brick that's being shown there. If we go to a monotone brick, if you want to go with just one solid brick color, we feel that having the varied brick color like that gives some depth to the facade. This drawing here shows this all as one color. It's not the varied brick as in the sample there.
Let me ask another question, if I may. I'm assuming there's going to be sprinklers in the green space on the terraces to ensure that those plantings continue to grow? A sprinkler system in the terrace green space?
Oh, on the green, yes, on the,
There will be sprinkler systems in every one of those terrace
those
green
will be,
spaces?
those will have
Fully
access.
irrigated?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
So, thank you, Commissioner Croner. So, as we move down for any other further questions for the petitioner from the rest of the commissioners, if I could I just try to clarify where your, I don't want to say objection, but where your concerns are on this particular brick? If we were looking at this in a black and white photo and just looking at the design, do you have concerns there? As far as shape and size, or are you looking at just the variation in the colors? It's all a single tone. I just want to make sure we're honing in on
No, I'm looking,
whether it's the
this is
physical
supposed,
shape or...
this is supposed to be an upscale property. To me, that's cinder block at the bottom there. It looks like cinder block to me. Chiseled cinder block, I think it's called. It doesn't look like what we've shown or what was committed to in the last meeting. Whether or not staff pushed their team to go to that, which I don't know why you would do, but I mean, if something's committed to in a public forum, you stick by it, but you can bring back an alternative and say, listen, this is what I committed to, but this is what staff and I would recommend here. That'd be a better way to do it than just say, listen, I had 2 weeks, I couldn't get it done in 2 weeks, that's all I got. I appreciate you picking that up, but that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, I appreciate that. What I'm trying to hone in on is whether it's the physical design of it or the color, or perhaps both.
Both.
I think
Okay,
there's
all
two
right.
things. I think for a split face block, which we had on the other one, a cinder block, which is smooth face or cut face, those are in rows. And so that is really a CMU, and that's how they'll be designed. So what we picked up on this, what they're trying to project here, is not a CMU because it's not a straight row.
Mhm.
And that's what's reflected in the pattern then. You'll see some, it's all different. It's not a very big sample, but if you pull up that one picture, you get a better idea.
This is
there.
closer
That's
to the rendering than
exactly
the
what
original,
that is.
right? And so thank you, Pete. One of the reasons I was trying to hone in on that is I wanted you to go back to this photo because
Yeah, this picture
as I look at
shows-
this photo versus what I see in the table,
Right.
I see a difference in the physical
Shape.
the shape. This has much deeper mortar joints. The stones there's more variation and
You
they're
get more
rounded
shadow
corners.
patterns. And by
Exactly.
having all the
So-
different sizes like that, it actually looks like a hand-laid product.
Exactly. And so, to Commissioner Croner's point, the difference between, a rendering that's in the report versus this photograph versus what we see on the table, just trying to understand what the intent of the final product really is. And if we're looking at, and the commissioners are considering in their mind what we're seeing on the screen here versus what's in the report versus what's on the table, I could see there being a disconnect.
Well, I think Pete makes a good point. I mean, this is what he's been seeing, and he likes this. And you did ask for that specifically last time. And what I guess we took the liberty of, this is fairly illustrative as well, because the brick doesn't reflect what we ended up showing you last time. Because the brick is a varied different colors in brick. If you look at this picture up here, we had a choice between these two. Remember, we had both of these on the table? And this seemed to be the one that everybody wanted to go with. So once we went with this, which adds that dark gray in there, it begins to give you some depth and texture, if you will, to the facade. And we just feel that when you add that much texture and you have that much texture in the foundation, it just became too busy.
And I do think it is important too, and I know you did mention the fact that it will be, when the landscape grows up, that'll take some time, correct? But ultimately, it's going to be 75% of this area is going to be covered by or with plant material from the viewing public. So I understand, we were not trying to bait and switch you or anything else. It was just, this is the best we could do. And I apologize if I misled you in terms of what you thought that looked like, what I thought that looked like. I didn't see the sample until I walked in tonight either, so quite honestly.
Wants to pick that other one, it's just too heavy for me. What we were trying to do with this particular
You wanna see
sample, just pick it up, because he might like the other one better. We were trying to pull up the mortar color.
No, I know exactly what you're doing with that color.
So
Absolutely.
this one, if they can see that one, it's just too heavy. What, it's heavy, so, I mean, that one just seemed a little bit colder. I mean, it does pull the gray from the brick. I don't know if you are strong enough to put it up there, so that, I don't know if these guys.
That's fine. I can see from here.
Okay, so really quick, I'd like to progress the meeting on a little bit. I'm glad that we kind of went through these points. It's important. What the final development looks like is going to be important to us, to the village, to everybody.
To us as well.
I don't want to minimize the importance of that, but correct me if I'm wrong, the material itself, any of these, conforms to the village requirements. Is that an accurate statement?
Masonry.
Okay. All right. So I just want to make sure we're all clear on that point, that whichever product they end up going with, it all conforms. So I'd like to move down the commission to some of the points that I think are really important as far as the decisions to be made for recommendation.
Okay, I'm going to sit down, but if you have any questions, just holler.
Thank you. Thank you. So additional questions from the commissioners down this end, Commissioner Augustiniak, for the petitioner.
I do like the fact that the dog park got moved. That, when I initially saw that, the dog park there adjacent to the other residential areas, that wasn't, I couldn't have voted for anything like that. I'm appreciative that it got moved over there. So from what I've seen, accommodations that people on this commission have wanted have been made. And according to everything I hear from staff, we're in compliance on everything that's required by code. So that being said, I don't personally have any other questions.
Okay.
I just want to give a compliment to you guys and to the attorney and the staff. One thing, as many of you know, over the past meetings, there are a lot of times when residents felt shut out, that they didn't get their answers to the questions that they had. And if any of you went to the website and looked up the minutes of this meeting here that we're going through, you'll see that a considerable amount of time was spent by the attorney as well as by staff answering each one of the questions. And I want to say that also from the input from the development team too. So we hope we've met your needs here by answering the questions that were posed in our last workshop, even though technically the rules say that you guys can't ask questions, we have to ask the questions. Everybody worked together on this to try and put this together, and I want to say thank you to the residents for coming out, and thank you to the attorney, staff, and to the team for answering their questions. I appreciate that.
No questions.
Okay. Down this side, Commissioner Manning.
I just want to echo Commissioner Croner regarding the foundation.
Speak up, please.
I just want to echo Commissioner Croner's comments regarding the foundation panel. Since, you know, I'm an architect myself, and I've seen projects utilizing a panel such like this, and for this project that's going to be luxury, high-end, that product does not meet that in my opinion. I have used, products similar to that and a product similar to what has been shown on the renderings. It's painstaking and costs more, to get that look, but I just want to just again echo that comment, because that, for this high-end building, that is kind of like a, middle of the run, type of, finish, for it.
Okay. Commissioner Kern?
I think you've done a fine job explaining everything, answering any of our questions. I have no questions at this time.
None for me.
Okay, good. So I had a couple of questions here. A major and a very important point in the development proposal is all the amenities. It's been a huge selling point. We've talked about it. It's very important. I'm interested to know what commitment there is to continuing to provide these amenities over time. Right? So that's a huge factor going into this development. A year down the road, 2 years down the road, some of these initial amenities that are here out of the gate to support that it's a high-end upscale development. I recognize the need to be fiscally responsible, and at some point amenities start to get cut. What sort of commitment is there in the long term to ensure that we have continuing amenities so that the development continues to be as proposed? Is that something that's been considered?
Yeah, and that question has been asked. I think there's two approaches to that. Probably the legal or the regulatory way would be this is a special use, and you're approving it per certain plans, and so they have to build it according to the plans and maintain it according to the plans. Now, whether you could obligate a future board to take them to task in 10, 15 years if they decide to close the dog park. Yeah. I think probably what happens more often, and it's part of our whole thesis when we work with projects like this, and I kind of gave this early on, our job is to really drive up the cost of the project as much as possible, so there's cause and effect there. I mean, they're certainly there to make money on the project, and they're certainly there to have a profit. They're certainly there to maximize the rents that they can command. Well, how do you do that? Do whatever it's going to take to make them capable of commanding those rents. If they let the pool go fallow, if they, let the building fall in disrepair, they're not going to be able to command those rents, and so their bottom line, profit line is going to suffer. So it's always been sort of a basic thesis I've had in development down the road, especially when you're looking at a project like this, that you're going to build in value through building materials and build in by amenities. So
Okay.
I think it's twofold.
Yes. So it's really a question out there. I'm not proposing that we require, get complicated about some sort of requirement, and I don't think that that's manageable.
I don't know what it would be.
It's really just something that I would like discussed and considered, and sounds like it has been as part of the development. The amenities all along have been the pitch, right? So being optimistic, I would expect that that they want to deliver on what they've been proposing all along, and will continue to have that, and they'll command the high rents. And I will be optimistic that we don't start to get into a cost-cutting mode and amenities start to fall off, either to increase margin or what have you.
It follows the market.
Yeah, but I do realize there's a supply and demand element there.
And you have property maintenance codes as well down the road. So
yeah, but again, not all of these amenities are they can be cut without sacrificing property maintenance.
True.
So again, it's something to be considered about the commitment to ongoing amenities And, you know, they, you know, in any business, something doesn't provide value to the residents, well, why would you spend money on it, right? You know, you might survey the residents, and they might say, well, I don't care about that amenity, so you take that away. That makes sense. You know, you might replace it with another amenity. It's, again, I'm not looking to conditions approval on that. I just want to make sure that it's something that's considered down the road. The video, I didn't catch. How recent is that?
A couple weeks.
Yeah.
It's very
It
recent.
looks like October 22nd.
Okay.
I've heard a couple people saw it, you saw it.
Okay. Well, it's good. Very timely, and of course you bring it because it supports your case. But I appreciate seeing it, you know, because it's not just you saying it or some report. I mean, you know, it's objective somewhat. The elevators, I appreciate you speaking to that. I didn't actually see this, and I'm going to assume, again, it's covered under staff review, but the size and capacity of the elevators, not all of the elevators are equal, if you've been in a building with a tiny little elevator. But
We have fire standards. It has to accommodate a stretcher and life safety
Okay.
issues. So,
Right. So-
they will have their own desire to make sure it allows to function as a freight elevator as well.
Okay, so that was my point, especially since there's only one, it effectively is the freight elevator.
Right.
So,
And I think Scott talked about that last time. A
Yeah,
little bit
basically
smaller
after
than a
talking to
standard
Otis,
elevator.
after talking to Otis Elevator, we'll be going with the taller elevator cab to allow for furniture to be brought into the elevator.
That's
So,
excellent. All right.
uh,
Thank you. And again, the development is going to be single-phase development, start to finish.
Correct.
And obviously, your end date depends on your start date. But approximately, what was the build-out time? I think it was in the report, right?
Yeah, probably like 18 months.
Okay. So then, the last point, and this is an important one because it goes to what the exceptions are. The height. There was both in the staff report as well as the petitioner's presentation. We talked about the comparison of the existing development versus this, and that you're starting from a 10-foot lower elevation. So comparatively, you know, they're kind of the same. I get that, but just for devil's advocate, I do want to point out that that comparison and the equivalence is based on a distant vantage point. You're over on 191st, you're over here, you're over there. So when you're looking at a distance, they appear the same, but a more proper comparison would be from a near vantage point when you're standing on the street and you're looking at a building that's 10 foot taller versus you're over on that street and it's a building that isn't 10 foot taller. So I concede the point, and that, you know, you're 10 foot lower, and from a distance, you know, it doesn't look out of place. But another appropriate comparison is a close vantage point. Just want to make sure that we're thinking about that.
We also, if you look at our building now, we've lowered the ends, so those are only 3 stories tall versus the 4-story that's across on like Brookside Glen is 4 stories across the entire length. So we've actually, as you're looking at from like the townhomes, you're going to be seeing the 3-story side first, and then you're going to be further away before you get to the 4-story side.
I appreciate you pointing that out, because that actually is a very important design element.
And
that you're breaking it up, it's not a block. So I appreciate that. Last point, and I really, you know what, I'm not even going to bring that one up, all right? I think we'll just leave it at that. So, do we have any final points that the petitioners would like to bring up? Okay, before we close the public hearing, any final points from the commissioners? No. Okay, with that, do I have a motion to close?
Public comment?
Thank you. Who said that? Excellent point.
It comes after the.
I apologize.
No, yeah.
At this time, do we have anybody, there were a few people who were sworn in. If you wouldn't mind stepping up here. And anybody that came in later would like to speak, just let me know and we'll swear you in. Thank you for getting me on this. And as we're preparing, again, because this is a public hearing, I ask that you would state your name for the record.
Michael Stocklos, resident of Brookside, Glen townhouses. Thank you, Mr. Shaw and the rest of the commissioners. You stole half my thunder already. But one point I wanted to make with regards to the building height. Okay, you already brought it up that it's apples to oranges because they're too far away. But in regards to the townhouses, we're right there at the same elevation. They could easily lower the height of the buildings by, do you need 14-foot ceilings? Can't you get by with 10 or 11-foot, 12-foot ceilings? Their 14-foot ceilings are on the first floor and the fourth floor, so you could easily eliminate 6 to 8 feet off the building height right there by lowering the ceiling heights of those, first and fourth stories. Secondly, the traffic study. I'm glad they did a traffic study, but that was in today's volume of traffic. You already brought it up that it was done, but it doesn't pose anything with future traffic. Traffic on 80th Avenue is already bad to start with, but it's only going to get worse with the proposed improvements to 80th Avenue. So you did a traffic study based on today's volumes and increased volumes from the proposal, but what about future studies as to the increased traffic flows that are going to be there once they do the improvements to 80th Avenue? One thing that was brought up at 3 or 4 months ago was the AC louvers, and I haven't seen anything talked about it in this segment where the prior commission wanted samples of the AC louvers because you couldn't tell by the pictures what they actually looked like, and nothing's been brought up here about these AC louvers and how they are actually going to look. So that's one question that the previous board or the commission had on this issue, and that issue was never resolved to anyone's satisfaction at the time because the builder failed to even bring in a sample at that time, and we're still waiting to see a sample of those AC louvers and how they're actually going to look on the building. You already brought up the condition of the construction traffic exiting from 191st Street instead of Greenway Boulevard because the residents there don't want to see construction traffic all day long, so you already talked about that. I'm sure this is something that would have to come in later, is some sort of traffic control, stop signs on Magnuson and Greenway once this gets put into, if this gets approved, because once people find out that they can bypass the light at 191st and 80th Avenue, this will become a through street for a lot of people that want to avoid that traffic there. So that's going to also increase the amount of traffic that the proposed traffic study said was actually going to be using, this street then. And lastly, transparency. All we keep hearing about is the PUD approved this. This was done, 20 years ago, things were done differently in this town. So according to what we hear now, new sheriffs in town, whether we agree with what the sheriff's doing or not, that's beside the point. But transparency is what we're supposed to be about. Just because something was approved 20 years ago doesn't mean you should approve it now just because it was approved 20 years ago. We need documentation as to the reasons why it was approved. Nothing's ever, been decided. All we hear about, which I don't want to be a dead horse, but the R5, R6 issue, that's dead. We all understand that, but just because it was done 20 years ago, however they approve things, I hope this time we do it with transparency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ma'am,
yes.
Ma'am, before you speak, can I just address a couple things? Because I was one of the biggest loudmouths on the air conditioner units on the brick. I actually went, from the list that they had given us, I went to there's a apartment complex off of 355 and Butterfield Road, which this type of construction is used. And I went and saw it firsthand to see what it looked like. And quite honestly, it doesn't look as bad as I thought it would. Does it look fantastic? No, but it doesn't look really that, it really doesn't look that bad. And those buildings are 6, 7 years old, I think. You could see the older ones because the Louvres have improved with the newer buildings. So I do want to share that with you. I hear you loud and clear on that. I was one of the biggest loudmouths on it, and I feel a little bit comfortable. And let me just address one other point from the previous commission. Since Ken and Commissioner Stanton and myself were on the previous commission, I can assure you and all residents of one thing. Nothing gets done or gets passed by this board because that's the way it was, or that's what happened 20 years ago. I think we showed our independence by even refusing staff's recommendation, the attorney's recommendation, to try and disapprove a positive motion. In other words, voting against a positive motion, we wouldn't even give up a positive motion. We refused to do it. And one thing is on, and I think all these folks that are on this board here, this commission, we're not going to do things. We will be as transparent as we can. We will try and get you answers. I mean, to the folks that were here 2 weeks ago, every one of those questions were answered. It's not the old style of school politics where forget the residents and we're just going to do what we want. That's never how we have been. And I'll tell you, when I leave this board, either because I move, I die, or because things aren't going the way they should be going. And I'll be one of the loudest mouths out there, I can promise you that. So I just wanted to address your couple concerns. I'm sorry.
My name is Jean Madden, and I'm a concerned resident. I had questions primarily about the traffic pattern. Some of those have already been addressed and answered tonight, but I'd just like to tell you a brief story. This happened to me about 3 weeks ago, traveling on 80th Avenue, going north towards 191st Street and 80th Avenue. A school bus broke down, and traffic basically came to a standstill. So I noticed this before I got to the entrance to the condominiums on the east side of 80th Avenue for Brookside Glen. What I noticed was there was a great movement of traffic off 80th Avenue through the subdivision in order to avoid this intersection because of the tie-up. Now that was a minor thing. I have no idea how long it lasted because I cut through, to be honest with you. So I think what my biggest concern for this is not the buildings that people have worked very hard to try to adapt and to build to accommodate people coming to the area, but perhaps some of the different infrastructure items which may be beyond this group. I think to myself when I see 960 trips coming out per an engineering study, that since we don't have any sidewalks in the area, we'll have possibly more than 960. 960 would be about 480 in the AM, 480 in the PM. But with the absence of sidewalks and the 80th Avenue Bridge over I-80 has not been fixed. I know there was something in the board information about possibly having that completed, also about the work that is projected for 191st and 80th Avenue. I don't see any date on that yet. I'm sure that there may be people in this room privy to those dates. I have not seen anything in writing. So what I'm concerned about is that you have 144 units in the 4 buildings that is going to generate an incredible amount of traffic. And if there are backups, the people definitely will be looking for different directions to get to work and get to I-80 or get to LaGrange Avenue or wherever they need to go. They won't be walking over the 80th Avenue Bridge. that's not going to happen because it's extremely dangerous there. The other thing that I notice is that there is no sidewalk, and as far as I know, until the 191st and 80th Avenue improvements have been done, there will be no sidewalks for people to walk that direction in order to get to the train station, which is an amazing train station. I fear, based on what I saw with some projections for the improvements at 191st and 80th Avenue, that there will be even greater amounts of accidents there. I think that was a hot spot, if I recall. I don't know if there were rear ends. There was actually a graph and a breakdown of the kinds of accidents at that intersection. I see this as people trying to leave off Magnuson onto 191st Street, which is a county road which apparently nobody has any control over right now, without any kind of traffic signal, which was already brought up. I see a lot more accidents occurring there because people have nowhere to walk. Therefore, they will be creating more trips in order to get from their residence to Brookside Marketplace or the new construction that's going to be completed at 191st and Harlem on the southwest corner. There'll be an amazing amount of traffic. Yes, we're approximately a mile away, but that's a destination point. So I guess I'm concerned about the infrastructure as well as the actual building that's going on there. As somebody mentioned about looking at the future for the continuation, the upkeep of the different buildings, I don't know what's going to occur with the actual infrastructure around this, with commercial coming in, with 191st and 80th Avenue being developed, and with, God willing, a bridge being redone over 80th Avenue. That seems to be very far in the horizon. I have seen nothing that's in writing about this occurring. So my concern is traffic. We have school buses, we have children in the area. This has been brought up prior. But I don't understand how this particular 144-unit area is going to attract young professionals or people leaving their homes, empty nesters, if they have to hop in their car every single time that they leave that building. So if there's anything that the board or the developers can share that would allay my fears, I would be most appreciative, because I do lay awake nights thinking about this. I think it's a great thing to build this up. I stood at 191st and 80th Avenue 20 years ago and looked out from a condo at the beautiful fields that were at that intersection. There was no Brookside Marketplace. There was no Panduit. This area has really grown. I see that it probably will continue to grow. So I'm hoping that the commission, the developers, and any other interested parties would take this into consideration, because although this could be a very beautiful development, it is not in isolation. It is part of Tinley. It's part of a traffic plan. It's part of where people will be walking to get to where they need to go, if they have the means. If they don't have the means, there will be a lot more traffic generated. So I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Stephanie has a response.
Yes, so please go ahead, because I had a question on that, but you might answer it.
Just to address one of your concerns about the improvements to the 80th Avenue Bridge and the intersection of 80th and 191st, the engineer's memo that had the trip counts and the projections for the traffic also included a paragraph that we had in our last meeting packet for the meeting on October 19th. It was in there in writing, just so in case you want to read it, but I'll read it aloud for you.
I already did read that.
Okay.
But the impression I got was that this is all in the planning stage.
Yes.
Nothing has been actually agreed upon. Legislation has not been paid. Taxes have not been allotted. This is a plan. And as a resident of Tinley for the last 16 years or so, I've seen a lot of plans projected, marvelous plans that would only benefit the homeowners and the residents, any resident, but they don't come to fruition. And so this particular development is being predicated on the fact that these other things will come to pass. But I've been waiting for 80th Avenue Bridge and the improvements at 191st Street for at least 7 years.
According to the village engineer, the current plan for design is to be completed in 2019 and construction in 2020. So that's the most current information. I think you're referencing an open house that we held
Yes.
either earlier this year or
Yes.
last year. I went to that as well.
Yes.
And so obviously the studies are underway and they're working on it. It is a county project in conjunction with the village though, so it does take time obviously, but it looks like they have a schedule, as well as, like Paula mentioned, there is funding that has to go along with it as well. So they know that there are needs for the intersection and the bridge improvement, and they're working on it. Like you said, it may take a little more time possibly, but they know it's needed and it's been studied and it's moving forward as far as our engineer has told us.
I hope you're right. Thank you.
So,
Okay.
go ahead, Pete.
I was just going to say, ma'am, one other thing. In this venue, we can only hold the developer, our purview is what they're doing.
Right.
And if you look at the photo that's up on the TV up there, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but there is a sidewalk from the beginning of the property to the end of the property. They are doing their part in regards to your request for sidewalks. The rest of it is up to the village, which there you have to go to the village board. That's outside of our purview right now. And believe me, I wish every one of you would go to the village board and tell them exactly what should be done, because as you all know, there are many people that are not listening on that village board to the residents. They're doing what they want anyhow, and that's a political soapbox, but I apologize. But as a resident, I get frustrated over that, so I hear your concern. But what we can do here, and what staff has done, and what the team, the developer has done, is they have included sidewalks. And actually, if you look at it, I think it'll turn out really nice once it's finished here. So just to let you know, we can control that, and the developer has responded to that.
So that's an excellent point, and it's what I was actually going to bring up there. But to expand on that a little bit, the village does have somewhat of a track record of having nice plans, and they don't always come to fruition. That's not on these folks here. We have to hold them accountable and responsible to the extent we can, but that's kind of out of what they're responsible for. But I did want to bring up a point here, and I want to ask both staff's opinion as well as the village attorney. My understanding is, although things such as sidewalks, the property that they're developing, we can hold them responsible for that. But if we can find a reasonable nexus in the impact of this development and some need, I believe it is possible in some cases to say that they, for instance, would either have to put in sidewalks all the way up to, off their property, or some payment in lieu of that. So I'm not proposing that. I wanted to get clarification so that we have understanding on that point.
Sidewalks are part of subdivision regulations. This is really a minor development compared to what's going to happen across the street. There's a lot of land yet to develop, and so, those are requirements that are part of the whole PUD and part of the subdivision regulations.
For this particular development, as Commissioner Croner said, there are sidewalks throughout. And I went back to the plan just before I said that, just because I wanted to make sure I was correct in that. We had looked at some others last year where they weren't in there. And we do have a lot of gaps in our sidewalks throughout the town. And my position is wherever and whenever possible, we should always require it, even if it goes up to the end of a property. Just because we were wrong yesterday doesn't mean we have to be wrong today. So, okay, I think that was it. We'll go back to you folks there. Thank you.
Good evening. I did not anticipate speaking in front of everybody, so please forgive my casual dressed tonight. A couple questions came up. I wanted to dovetail on a comment that you made about the traffic. I live in the condos, the Brookside Glen condos, and in particular the one directly behind the fire station off 191st and Brookside Glen Drive. Traffic patterns, it is getting pretty difficult to turn from Brookside Glen Drive, either left or easier obviously going right, but left on 191st at certain times of the day because that area is getting more and more and more busy. Couple of questions, some may just be food for thought. I know renting is up because of the economy that we're in now and because of the housing crash. Hopefully it's not going to stay that way forever, but just what happens when that changes? And again, that may not have an answer for that at this moment, but some food for thought. I had a question on the property taxes that you're anticipating for this project. You mentioned $350,000, and there's 144 units. Is that correct?
Yes.
What's the square footage on the units again? I'm sorry, I don't recall.
They vary, but one bedrooms are 800 square feet.
Just over 800.
Yeah. And then
Those houses, over 1,000 square feet.
Okay. That just seems low for me, knowing what I pay for taxes. If you divide out just for simplicity's sake, $350,000 divided by 144 is about $2,400 annually for taxes, and I would love if my taxes were $2,400 a year. They're not, and I'm just a little curious as to why it's so low. In fact, almost half of what.
Well,
That's just a guess.
it's an estimate, and quite frankly.
Well, okay, so I'm just curious as to where that figure came from.
Well, we just did a sort of square foot valuation based on, but we have no. I would love to be able to tell the county what to assess and to tax us, but we cannot. So that's just a sort of rough estimate.
Well, but that's a factor in the planning.
That's obviously going to impact ours. So if yours are higher, then our guess is probably off. And I don't get to tell them that I would like to pay.
Yeah, it's
certainly, but that's a component of your plan, a big component of your plan, because property taxes are a huge,
It is. And it is based on the valuation that we used, which is one of the factors that the county considers when they assess property. It is not the only factor, and certainly every year things change and move around on that.
They never go down.
So can I ask you a question to clarify this?
Sure.
Here? I just want to make sure I understand. If your point there, if they have severely underestimated the property taxes, then clearly they're going to get hit with a bigger tax bill, and there will be more tax revenue coming in. Is your concern that they have underestimated it, or
it was some curiosity? It's was that did that come from somebody?
So,
and if so,
are you concerned
why
they're
is it
getting
so
a tax
low?
break? Is that
Well, sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's a concern.
my understanding is that there are no such incentives associated with this plan. Is that
There
correct?
are no incentives.
Zero.
We just used the valuation times the last known rate and an equalizer, and we ran it, and, it's a guess. It's a ballpark. It's based on some rational numbers, but it is certainly nothing that I would,
Tax assessment tends to be alchemy more than
There's
science.
supposed to be a rational formula somewhere in there, but, we use the valuation that we have, but ultimately, obviously, the county will assess the value that they put on it.
Yep.
And that's the one we have to live with.
So does that address your concerns? I just want to make sure we're clear on
Yeah,
that.
no, that's
Because I
fine.
thought you were maybe getting at the possibility of incentives and tax breaks and things like that.
It's certainly a curiosity, and it's just,
Yep.
yeah, that's the largest.
Another thing out there, the units at Brookside Place are about 1,600 square feet, and not all of our units are that size. So you're not comparing sort of apple bushels.
Right, like I said, for simplicity's sake, I just divided by
So we
them.
have a mixed bag of sizes, and certainly that has an impact. You're talking sort of uniform 1,600 square foot units on that side of 80th Avenue. We have a much bigger range, and that would certainly impact your tax.
Well, and you also have this extraordinary clubhouse too. That's gonna be a part of it all. But I'll move on to my next one. I know you had a slide up there. It kind of went by more quickly than I was able to kind of absorb. why are we so adamant that these have to be apartments and not condos? I mean, I think, me personally, if I was going to spend, and I know that this has come up before at these meetings, if I was going to spend that kind of money a month, and you know, I would want to invest it. I would want to, even if I sold it for what I bought it for, you know, I would at least balance out, you know, it'd come out even at the end. I wouldn't be throwing my money away. I think, and again, this came up before, I think the young people that you think may rent these, I think they're going to want to live in the city. There's a lot of wonderful amenities that you're talking about there, but I just think geographically it's not appealing for the 20-somethings and the early 30-somethings.
Well, so before the petitioner responds, I believe the village attorney has addressed this in the past and he'd like to discuss.
Okay.
Yeah, just briefly, if you're asking their business decision why apartments or condos, I guess they probably have run numbers and figured that apartments work. You know, as a straight business decision. As a legal decision, it's something that we've talked about here before, you know, many times. When we start getting into the difference between an apartment and a condo, we start talking about ownership and who's going to live there. And it's not proper for a zoning hearing. So if you're asking for that legal question, why apartments, not condos, that you know,
It's a
that's
zoning
one thing.
issue.
If you want to, you know, their business decision, why they're doing it, is you're saying no one's going to come in. I'm not going to speak for them because I'm not a developer. I don't know anything about it, but my guess would be they've crunched numbers, and you know, I don't think they would build it if they didn't think they could fill it. But again, I have no idea.
Right.
I'm not a developer.
And just another point, it's in the previous proposal that was brought early on, and again, kind of sidestepping that question that the village attorney is addressing, I asked the developer about whether or not they potentially had thought about down the road when it might make sense to make them go condo, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's a business decision, and at the time, their response was, you know, if it makes sense at the time economically, of course, they're going to do that, right? So, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but, you know, that's, it's all a business decision, I would assume.
My last question, again, maybe more just food for thought. What happens, it kind of dovetails on my last one, what if you can't rent out these, or you can rent out two, you know, and it you know, falls into a state of disrepair, or it's, you know, not looking good, it's not kept up. I think that's, you know, probably one of the biggest concerns for those of us in the room who lived in the area. I could be wrong, but I think that you have trouble renting these out for the proposed rents that you're talking about, and then, you know, then what happens if they're not rented? So again, that's kind of just more food for thought, and thank you for the opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you.
Hi. How you doing? My name is Brian Galuski. I'm a resident of Brookside, Glen. I had a couple questions. One is about the detention. Did you say that you do not know who the owner of that detention pond is to the north?
No, we don't.
Okay. So that detention serves the property, right?
And more.
Okay. What's the plan for maintaining it? Because right now there's like 10-foot weeds there and stuff. It doesn't sound like from the presentation that no one knows what's going on with that.
It will be developed when this project gets developed. So they will not receive occupancy until that detention pond meets the standards that were approved when it was originally designed. So,
what are those standards?
Pardon?
You said it won't be.
It's tied to this development.
Okay.
And we've already spoken to the developer, and he's aware that this project's going through the approval process, and he understands that he has to get it approved. He's also responsible for the roadway and the connection to 191st. So Eamon Malone, you might know him as part of the original developer for Maloney.
Okay.
So great developer, very cooperative. He understands what his obligations are.
And what are those?
To
maintain it?
To maintain it, but to improve it. It doesn't meet the standards that it needs to be right now. So, but nothing's built there yet. So when something
Okay.
gets built, it's been engineered and it would have to meet those standards.
So again, how do you know that since it's separate ownership, how do you know that they will do that?
Because we have an LOC guaranteeing it.
Okay. So that'll be like landscaped and maintained prior to the development
And the road
being
would be
completed.
completed and
Okay. The other thing too, I wanted to ask about the use. I know, it said condominiums are considered multifamily units. That was pretty confusing. Like in the Village of Tinley Park zoning ordinance, there's two very different definitions of condominium and multifamily. The substantial deviation says condominium is the only use for this site. That means that'd be 144 separate legal units, correct? I don't understand how, doesn't the developer need to make a specific request in the special use application to change the use from condominium to multifamily?
I can answer that, Brian. And we have talked about it, I know last time we came back and it's something we went and looked at. And in one of our meetings, I thought I think I discussed it, and, I'd probably like it as a deviation. There I go, speaking without looking at something looking at it more. The deviations, as you see, those are height, those are variance, those are, required specifically by the zoning code, okay? For this, condominium is not required specifically by the zoning code. But you're absolutely right. The 2000 ordinance, it says condominium, I don't know how many times. So I don't, for reasons of transparency and everything like that, I see it as part of the overall substantial deviation that comes in, and that's what it says. They're going from 9 condominium units to 4 multifamily apartment units. As to the specific finding on that, I don't think a specific finding is required, and if I was wrong earlier, but I apologize, but I've looked at this. A specific finding would require, they're both multifamily uses in the sense that, there's going to be many dwellings within one unit. Correct. Condominium, they would be owned separately. You're absolutely right. But on the same lines, under that separate ownership, they could all be rented out. So I guess that was kind of where I came down on that.
I think there's been some exchange of words, and that sometimes we use the word definition of deviation and exception, and those really are different, distinct issues. To your point, this is a deviation from what was approved earlier, and it's been very clear that it's not condominiums, they're apartments. But could they, it'd be a nightmare, could they go and have each one of those apartments under a different owner, under their partnership? They could. There's nothing stopping us, or I wouldn't know why anybody would want to do that. But to his point, that all speaks to ownership, and so it isn't an exception because we don't regulate that. The exceptions come to, we regulate building height, we regulate setbacks, we regulate, what's the other one, FAR. So those are exceptions. The deviation from the 2000 code is just what Stephanie had described early on in her presentation.
The deviation is what again?
The deviation is from what was approved in 2000, and as Patrick just mentioned.
So what's the mechanism by doing that? Like, is that?
This is special use, that's what we're doing.
So that has to be included in the special use application? The change from ownership?
Part of our presentation on how they're deviating. So we've expressed that, Stephanie discussed that early on in her presentation, how they're deviating from the original proposal.
Well, I'm saying in the special use application, do you have to specifically request going from condominium to multifamily?
It is multifamily.
Yeah, it is,
So-
both of them are
No, there's
multifamily.
there's
Yeah, go ahead.
So multifamily is units one on top of the other. A condo, is that an apartment? Is that, it's used interchangeably?
no, it's not interchangeably. There's two different definitions in the Village of Tinley Park zoning code about condominium and multifamily. They're very different things. So I don't see how, I'm just confused. I don't see how you use them interchangeably. There's two very different definitions of condominium and multifamily.
One talks
So
about building type and one talks about ownership.
So I'm asking, like, condominium is the only use in the substantial deviation. They don't have to make a specific request.
They have. They've asked for substantial deviation.
Well, I read in
part
the special use permit, I don't see anything about the change in use going from going from condominium to multifamily.
That's what it says.
No, in the special use, I don't have a copy of it in front of me, but I'm saying
Well, the
it doesn't
motion,
say
I
that.
think as it's crafted, is being very clear that they are going from a 9-building condominium proposal to a 4-building multifamily apartment proposal.
But I'm just saying that the document, the special use permit application that the developer submitted doesn't say anything like that.
I think it says multifamily, but
No, it doesn't.
I'm less concerned about the actual application form.
No, I think the application, the special use permit application should be exact and precise and say what they're actually doing.
Yeah, and we've had emails since then and documents.
But the actual document, the special use application that the developer submits I would think should say exactly what they're trying to do. It doesn't.
It does on the site plan approval application, and then in their request here for.
But not in the special use permit application, doesn't say it.
Their narratives that they have attached to their application say the word multifamily in regard to the proposed development several times.
Okay, but it doesn't say changing use from condominium to multifamily.
It describes what the request is.
Okay. In regards to the floor area ratio, can you go back to that slide? Or you could go to the next one where it highlights the 0.65. So the site plan says the building size is 289,000 square feet, and the floor area ratio is 0.9. But you chose to highlight the red thing where it says like 0.65, and then you go on to explain in the staff memo that says then you start excluding all these areas like parking and mechanical areas and stuff like that. You reference some article from the American Planning Association from 1948 that talks about floor area ratio. And the thing that's really upsetting here is that, number one, floor area ratio was never brought up in any previous plan commissions until someone from the community brought it up last week. So all you guys probably have a combined over 100 years of experience, and no one ever brought up floor area ratio, which is clearly spelled out in the Village of Tinley Park zoning code. No one ever thought to bring it up. So I'm wondering why that is. Was that intentional? I mean, is it just someone missed it? Because that's pretty important. Floor area ratio, the building size is 300,000 square feet roughly. The floor area ratio allows only 200,000 square feet. That's 100,000 square feet more than what is allowed by the zoning. Now you spend a lot of time in the application saying that exclude mechanical rooms and exclude parking and all this and that. And again, you reference that American Planning Association article from 1948. But what you failed to do is look at the actual definition in the Village of Tinley Park zoning code, which talks about gross floor area. It says mechanical rooms are included. And when you look at the definition of floor area ratio in the zoning code, it doesn't say anything that parking is excluded. So my biggest concern is I don't know what you call it, the manipulation of data or something, but all the data is favorable to the developer, and it's just not, it's just not true in my opinion. The real FAR is 0.9, but you highlight the 0.655. You fail to cite the definitions from the Village of Tinley Park zoning code, and it's favorable to the developer, not the community. You reference the FAR for the Brookside Place condos across 80th Avenue, but keep in mind, in all past Plan Commission memos, there's always references there about how those buildings across the street were a mistake. We don't know how it got that high. We don't know how it got that dense. So if you're comparing, this development to the stuff across the street, it's not a good comparison. Even the staff memos from previous plan commissions say it, the project was a mistake. And my biggest concern is just the size of the buildings. It's 300,000 square feet. Panduit across the street is about the same size, roughly 280,000 square feet, and it's on twice the amount of acreage. It's like 30 acres, Panduit is. So I think, when people, so floor area ratio was never brought into the conversation, and I think that's the reason why, is then you realize what the true density and size and bulk of this project is. I mean, the townhomes across the street are only 200 feet away, and then you have these immense buildings, like 300,000 square feet in size.
Can I address that?
Yeah.
First of all, you need to be complimented because you have done an excellent job. I mean, not many people.
Well, because I think we really had to look over this whole process, and I really do feel like, I'm not saying data was manipulated, but it just never in the favor of the community. And so I think we had to be watchdogs on this, definitely. It's the community, like the data was, there's there's so much missing data. The community can never really evaluate it. Like, what's the zoning? Zoning map says R5, and it's said that for a very long time, probably since the developer even owned it. Now, all of a sudden, it's R6.
Well, let's go back. Let's just talk about FAR first. Can I address your concerns?
Go ahead.
Because I understand, and from, I don't know what your background is, but I think you've really done a good job getting up to speed on planning. But I've been a planner for over 37 years, and I can tell you.
So if you've been a planner for 37 years, how did you miss FAR?
I just
Seriously, that's a basic zoning principle. It's a basic zoning principle. It's written in the zoning code. So how was that missed?
Okay, can I respond now?
Yeah, how was it missed?
So if you understand what a PUD does, that's the whole point of a planned unit development, is the flexibility of the code. Bulk regulations, and you sort of took made fun of the date. That was just to give you some sort of historical understanding of how zoning has progressed over the years. FAR was not part of basic bulk regulations and planning terms for many years. It started out just basic bulk regulations that looked at setbacks and building heights. And over the years, as planned unit developments, and I don't have a date off the top of my head, when the whole term of a PUD even became a planning mechanism, because the rigidity and the confinement of working just off of setbacks and building heights became confining for development. And as the development communities and cul-de-sacs and new planning trends evolved, planners began to look at new ways to massage the look of a development or subdivision and find different tools. Just like now, for example, there are many codes, like our legacy code, that look at either performance-based zoning or look at form-based zoning, where they're no longer even looking at something that says your front yard has to be 30 feet or your side yard has to be 20. They're trying to build in flexibility. So in terms of layers, you have your foundation is bulk regulations, just like I said in the memo. On top of that, which really is supposed to make more flexibility, is FAR. When you're working with a PUD, especially in this PUD, that the density has already been identified at 144, the FAR becomes somewhat meaningless because, as we pointed out, the 9 building far exceeds the FAR than what's being proposed. The parking versus not parking being included, those numbers, that 0.6 includes mechanical rooms, recreation, cabanas.
And not the parking.
All of that is included in there.
The only thing it does not include is the parking and the drive-through parking.
So the stuff on the bottom includes the parking.
No, it does not. It's apples to apples. So all those numbers of existing, all of those are evaluating everything on an even playing field. And parking is not included in FAR. The fact that Tinley's ordinance doesn't mention it, I can't attest to how it was written. But you could look through codes, and when I mentioned the APA dictionary and journal, these are professional documents that I use to go back and look at how other communities look at FAR. And the reason why parking isn't included, especially in this circumstance, there's not a requirement for that parking to be underground. That's actually something that we consider an amenity. I mean, they could go ahead and put that parking, all surface parking, and actually one of the original plans had all surface parking. So, and we couldn't stop that. So imagine if you didn't have underground parking on this proposal, and they put all the parking on the outside. That certainly, in my mind, would be a negative impact on their proposal. So bringing it in doesn't, you can't have it both ways, where you're bringing it in and improving the development and then counting it against them.
Well, it may not be a negative impact to the community because the buildings would be
Well,
shorter
but I
then.
think the other, and we were just discussing this in our little notes, the other item, it's in the staff report that you could read, is lot coverage. There's a relationship between setbacks, bulk regulation, building heights, FAR, percent impervious, lot coverage, and open space. They far exceed both the open space and the lot coverage numbers. They're required by PUD to have 10%. Help me with the number, I think it was 13 or something?
Yeah, I saw the lot coverage was less than what was required.
So it's all those things. When we're presenting something to the Plan Commission and we're working with the developer to try to get the best development out of that negotiation, we're looking at all of those things, and we have the right to do that in the context of a planned unit development. So again, I'm applauding you for all your hard work, but you're not really coming at it from a knowledge base of planning.
Okay. I'm just citing the Tinley Park zoning code.
I'm just saying I don't know what he does.
So you have to ask.
Okay, hold on.
No,
hold on. We're gonna keep
I'm
this.
talking. Hold on.
Wait, sir. I'm not speaking to you. Okay. Hold on. I'm asking the folks in the audience here. Let's have a conversation here. Okay.
So you talked about the flexibility in the PUD. I get that, but you still have to ask for exceptions, correct? You asked for an exception to the height. You asked for an exception to the setback. But again, floor area ratio is part of the R6 zoning, and that was missing up until last week when someone brought it up.
And I'm glad we looked at it early on. Some of the numbers were so close that we didn't take it on. I'm glad you brought it up. So thank you for doing that. In the end, we didn't feel that it was a substantial issue to make an exception.
Well, it sure does. It goes to the density and bulk of the building. It's 300,000 square feet, and under the R6 zoning, 200,000 square feet is allowed. And I think that gives people. It's 290,000 square feet. It's that gives people a sense of how big of the structure is. It's all been about zoning and number of units at for a long time, and now. Again, this was never included, and now it gives people a sense of how big these buildings are.
But when you're doing a PUD, you're looking at exchanges. So if you want to get this project down to exactly 0.6 instead of it's over 0.05, I would say, okay, let's take out the roof gardens where there's parking underneath. Let's take out some of the underground parking. Is that to the betterment of this development? They could reduce the size of the units. They could make the units smaller. Does that add to the value of the development? They could get rid of the clubhouse. I mean, the clubhouse adds significantly. I would suspect maybe if you take the clubhouse.
You said the lot coverage is
under what's required.
Sure. Are you able to lower the buildings, like reduce the height and spread the buildings out? Since you said
would increase the lot coverage. And
but I'm saying
the same FAR.
Huh?
It would increase.
No, I understand that, but I'm just asking just a general question. Can you? Because one of the concerns of the community is the height. Are you able to lower the height and expand, like the footprint of the building then?
I don't know if it would meet the lot coverage. It would probably exceed the lot coverage. I mean, I don't have the numbers. It would be an exercise to do that.
And they might have to be moved closer to the townhomes, and parking might have to be moved closer to the townhomes.
Has that ever been explored then, or?
Well, we went through, when you think about going from the 2-building proposal to the 4-building proposal, there certainly were considerations in there and playing pros against cons. And I believe through this process and involving the residents that we felt that the 4-building proposal and keeping the parking underground, making sure we kept all those amenities like Clubhouse, I want to say Hunt Club, the clubhouse and the pool, those were all positive things to keep the value of the project up. I mean, when I look at those numbers of 0.6 versus 0.9, 0.8, I mean, I think that's a substantial difference.
I don't think that's correct, because the stuff across the street is 18 dwelling units per acre. And this development's 18 dwelling units per acre too.
Different numbers.
I don't see how you can get like the floor area ratio down by that much.
It's different calculations. I mean, you researched.
Then what
this.
are the different calculations? I thought you
Because
said they were the
floor
same.
area is taking every floor. The dwelling units per acre is not taking in consideration the area of the particular units.
Okay, again, I just think the data, I don't know. Anyways, in regards to the market, they showed a video about the apartment market and how, it's booming, stuff like that. The condo and townhome market in Tinley Park is also booming too. Supply of condos has decreased consistently since 2011. Prices of condos are up 10% over the last year in Tinley Park. Townhomes, whenever you build a townhome or they go up for sale, or ones in Mokina, townhomes get sold in a matter of days. So regardless, they have their data about the apartment market. Tinley Park needs condos and townhomes too. They really need them. The supply is very low. Again, I don't know why they chose to build apartments. Condos are a much better option for this community. And if you look at the property taxes on condos, say like a condo is about $5,000 in annual taxes per year, that on 150 units, that would be about $750,000 of tax revenue compared to what they have at $350,000. So in terms of economic benefit, condos are a much better option.
So. On that point, because that's a very important point, and so I'll make a statement regarding housing mix, in my opinion, and if the village attorney wants to chime in on that. From my perspective, I think you're making some valid points about supply and demand and the need for certain types of housing mix. Currently, as I've read the village's comprehensive plan, which is pretty old, and I'm going to get on my soapbox and to Commissioner Croner's statement earlier, be a loudmouth myself. One of the reasons that I don't believe the Plan Commission can consider these sorts of things is because we don't have an explicit housing program that sets and tracks and monitors our housing mix as we should. And so when a proposal comes before us, we have very little to no basis to tell them, no, we're full on that kind, and you need to build this. So therefore, we don't really have a leg to stand on because we haven't defined that. We're not tracking it. We're not monitoring it to the extent we should. So if I'm somewhat on track with that statement there, I completely agree with you that we should be considering what the housing mix is so that we have a good spread and it meets the demand. But at this point in time, I don't believe we have a basis to tell a developer you can't do that. So that's...
I just brought it up as a point.
No, it's an excellent point.
Because, they keep pushing, how great the
with
apartment market is, and the condo and townhome market is just as good in Tinley Park and surrounding communities. The comprehensive plan is 17 years old. That's completely outdated. It should have been updated a long time ago. If you approve the 144 unit development and they build it, that's going to be more single family housing building permits that have been issued in the last 7 years in Tinley Park. So there's been very little single family construction, and Tinley Park definitely needs more of it. I think that was all I had to say. But I'm sorry. One more thing. I just want to reiterate that being involved with the community group in this process, it's been pretty disappointing and kind of disgusting. I mean, the data, the lack of data, I think again, I'm not going to say manipulation, but the data is presented in the favor of the developer, in my opinion. And it just, no one here seems to be pro-community, and I'm here looking out for the community's best interest. It just all seems to be about the developer and pushing this project through. That's my impression. I mean, that's what I feel throughout this whole process. I've spent considerable time with this community group analyzing everything. It's been super frustrating because there's so much data missing from this. I don't know how you can make an educated decision on any of this because much of the data is missing. It's ridiculous. We don't know what's allowed on the site. We don't know what the zoning of the site is. And I don't know how anybody can make an informed decision to move, about this project. So.
Thank you. Nice job.
What the heck? All right. I feel a little like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day because I feel like I've been at this meeting over and over and over. But I do appreciate the process. One of the things, as I understand it, that is required for variances to be approved is that it would not have a negative, whatever somebody is trying to do, wouldn't have a negative impact on property values. And I was interested to know whose responsibility is that to prove that? Is that up to me to show that this is going to negatively impact my property value? Because I think it's pretty much common sense and common knowledge that when you put a monstrosity like this there, that the houses, at least in the general perimeter of it, are going to be negatively impacted. And as one of those houses, I'm concerned about that. And really, this is something we've been talking about now for months. Nobody's really approached that. Talked about the viability of the project, which is important. If it's going to be built, we want it to be successful. But that being said, whether it's successful or not, what impact is it going to have on our housing values? And we've been here, myself, for 20 years paying taxes in this community, and I know what it's going to do to my housing value. So, and now it's too late to sell. So, because we all know what's going on. Also, when they originally talked about the variances for this property, they talked about 9 buildings. They, at that time, said that the proximity of the buildings was not in the best interests of the community. They, at that time, established a setback for those buildings and ultimately eliminated some of those buildings to put the pumping station in, to provide visual relief for the surrounding townhouses and single-family homes. And it doesn't appear at 198 feet that meets the setback requirement that was discussed and approved at that committee. So again, to some fine gentleman's point, a lot of this information seems to be conveniently missing. And while we have asked for people to do the research on it, it seems like a lot of the information that would help some of our cause can't be found, but the information that can help the developer can be. And so I ask again that we look at what the trade-offs were, because we talked about planned unit development or planned urban development, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't sound planned to me. It sounds like somebody comes up with an idea, comes in, and then we rearrange everything because it's a PUD. Instead of looking at what's best for the community, the people that are here now, and in anticipation of a development that, let's face it, it's being an apartment building because it's easy to get in and get out. Also asked about the developer's experience, and I really haven't heard anything. I saw a couple slides. How old is this LLC? How long have they been around? When was the LLC formed?
The LLC, this LLC was formed very recently.
Oh, well, you got those buildings built quick.
Right, because we have other companies.
But that's the point. There's no transparency in who the developer is. When there got to be some tough questions up here when this gentleman was up, the answers didn't come from here. They came from this side of the room. So I don't know who's building and whose experience we're basing these decisions on. Thank you.
So on that, first of all, do we have anyone else who would like to speak this evening? No. Okay, so just a couple of points here, and I really hate to be so precise here, but that's, I guess, what we do here. You mentioned a couple of times variances. I just want to correct that in this instance, it's not a variance, it's a deviation.
Exception.
Exception or, all right.
It's a special use with exceptions to the code.
Okay, so there you go. It's a very fine point, but I wanted to make sure that we clarified it there. I believe, Councilor Connolly, you had a comment or an answer about the burden of proof on impact to the community.
It's the petitioner's job to meet the standards required for approval. That's why we're here. That's why we have this evidence. That's why the staff does their reports. But, you know, the specific answer, it's the petitioner's job to meet the standards.
Okay, and then there was sir, you made a comment about setback requirement.
Yes.
I guess I wasn't really clear about which committee, which meeting, and what you were referring to. Because I want to make sure that if there's a question on it, we answer it. We get it clear.
So when Maloney and Crenna had come in for the variances to go from 3 stories to 4 stories, that was in 2000, I believe. The idea that these were monstrosities, the person that sat in your chair said it was in his opinion that going over 3 stories was not in the best interests of Tinley Park. But there was exchanges, and part of that exchange was to set back the building, because originally it was going to be 50 feet from the lot line of my next door neighbor and to the corner townhouse. It was going to be 75 feet. The group that you represent today determined that the setback needed to be further, and as I recall, it was 250 feet. And so they said that the buildings would have to be 250 feet from those 2 lot lines.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know if that tracks with staff's research.
There wasn't anything that we found that required a certain setback. I can go back to the slide with the 9 buildings so you can see the comparison from the 2000 plan. Just to give you an idea.
So while you're looking that up, I would like to get a clarification from the village attorney. Sure. We certainly want to be consistent as much as possible, and we want to consider previous objectives and principles that were put in place, but by considering site plan approval and these exceptions, if there were something previously where there was a setback in there, because it's a PUD, whatever we recommend for approval, that's what binds. Is that?
And that's part of your substantial deviation.
Right.
They're
That's
asking you to approve this site plan.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
So that's how it deviates.
So with respect to any previous agreement or requirement for setback, that's something for us to consider in the context of whatever recommendation we're going to make.
Right.
But it's not. But the exception itself, that's the point.
The exception would be what code is dictating. They're deviating, they're asking for a special use to deviate from the last approved plan.
Right.
The last approved plan, as Stephanie shows 9 buildings. So they're asking for, not this one, they're asking for the 4 building proposal. So if you approve of the 4 building proposal, you're approving a substantial deviation, just like they did back in 2000. Because in 2000, they had to deviate from the when was the original PUD?
1990.
1990 PUD. So,
Yeah, Commissioner, I think you had it right, you know, and I thought I saw on there, was it 200 feet? You know, again, I share the frustration. I don't have a document that says 250, but that 200 feet, yeah, should be something you should be thinking about.
Right.
but you can see from Stephanie's example, the buildings are actually further away well, I guess you don't have the 4-1. But it's still 198. The distance from the most northern townhome was 198 and some change to the 2-building proposal. It's the same distance from the 4-building proposal, which is closer than the proposal on the 9-building unit.
Okay.
Further, I'm sorry. Further.
So one last point there was brought up by one of the folks in here about the application and the details within the application. And from my experience, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this point here, that the petitioners fill out an application, they state their case. As we go through this process, when we get to the end, what they're requesting is not necessarily what the final motion is going to be. Many times over, based on workshops and the discussions with the commission, we will whittle it down and say we're willing to make, you want 100, we're willing to go 50, et cetera. So through this process that we're going through here, what they're requesting is not necessarily what the final recommendation is going to be.
Excellent point.
In fact, we've had several recent applications here where we kind of split the difference with petitioners, and my impression would be that they weren't very happy with what we were willing to recommend to the village board. So to that end, in my opinion, the petitioners are making the best case they can up front. They're not bound by that. We're not bound by that. It's wherever we end up and whatever we're comfortable recommending to the village board.
They're asking us to accept their proposal, basically. But that's a very good point. Good job.
So to that end, I think there's probably still some more deliberation to be done among the commissioners. But with respect to the public hearing, are there any other folks who would like to speak? This is an important topic. There's a lot of folks here. I don't want to brush past anything, so please.
I just had another question. I just wanted to ask, did you all read the application and the market report by the developer's consultant?
Yes.
The one thing we brought up in the prior plan commission was that, the market report, the developer's consultant cited like 4 projects where they showed property values surrounding multifamily developments might be higher than the city average, and I don't have that data in front of me. But, they gave a couple examples where they showed like property values surrounding the multifamily were higher than the community, but one of them was like White Eagle Golf Course in Naperville, and the buffer between the multifamily and the homes was a golf course, and golf course communities are typically higher in value. So you have to exclude that one. There was another development where there was a big buffer of like open space area from the apartment building to the single family homes, and then there was the developer's consultant gave this example where they showed property values surrounding multifamily were lower than the city average. I mean, it's their data. And that was probably the most comparable example to what's being developed here, where the multifamily was, very proximate to like single-family homes, and it showed like a 7% decrease in property values of homes surrounding the multifamily apartment. So in a $350,000 house, it's like, $21,000 something decrease in value. So I just wanted to bring up that point, just make sure that you read through the market report. I know there's a lot to read there, and I just wanted to bring that up too. Thanks.
Thank you. So I thought maybe I saw one other person.
Well, he said what I wanted to say, but he said it better.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So at this point, I actually would like to ask a question of the village attorney here. Okay. Before I entertain a motion to close the public hearing, it sounds to me, at least from my perspective, and I'd like to go down and get the consensus of the other commissioners, that there may still be some questions to be answered. And before we close the public hearing, I wanted to consult and see if we felt that there was more information that we wanted to get and it needed to be a matter of record. Would you advise that we close the public hearing and renotice if we decided to go that way, or would we continue to a date certain? Again, I haven't gone down and asked the commissioners, but rather than close the hearing.
Depending on what that information is, if it's something that could be done at your next meeting, the way I generally like to do it is, if you're going to continue it, the public hearing, you can. If you want to continue this public hearing, I generally don't like to go out further than the next meeting, if you're not going to renotice. If it's something that, hey, we need a month, I don't like continuing it a month. I like to go. So if you would need that month, I would say close the hearing and renotice it.
So two things before we entertain a motion to close the public hearing is I want to get consensus from the other commissioners whether you feel there's more information that you would need to be able to make a decision this evening. And in the interest of fairness to the developer, considering all the effort that they've gone in and all the time already, if we went that route, I would not want to go a month. I absolutely would want to go as quick as possible. So I'd like to just hear some thoughts starting on this side, get consensus about whether there's more data, more facts that you would need to be able to.
I don't see anything more information that I can.
Okay. Commissioner Croner?
Let me ask you a question, Stephanie, in reference to one of the residents' concerns about traffic flow. Can we put as part of our requirements that the town installs traffic control devices, i.e. stop signs, at the intersections that the gentleman referred to?
Not on, I can answer that, not on their
county road.
No, it's not a county road. This is, I'm talking about.
Magnuson and Greenway.
Right.
That intersection.
I mean, you can you guys always have the authority to recommend things to the village board, but, to condition that the village board has to do something on them, I think is, kind of,
We can make a separate recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to recommend that to the village board,
Make it part
I
of the
think that's
record that
fine.
you'd like direct staff to continue to look at
Yes.
the transportation and the traffic there. But, as our traffic engineer looked at that, you could see that it hasn't even risen, that intersection hasn't risen up to the level to warrant those at this time.
I think one good thing, we can make a commitment tonight, let's get it on let's get the traffic situations that were raised tonight, and I know we've talked with Mike and stuff, let's get it on a public works committee real soon. A specific item, traffic at 108, or 80th Ave and 191, or however we want to put it, but, that's going to get the ball rolling.
But see, we don't have a lot of authority over the county road. I'm more worried about that simple subdivision road, because I know exactly what he's talking about. What'll happen is, it gets backed up at that intersection. These guys are just going to fly right through the neighborhoods.
That's right.
And it's no good for them, it's no good for these apartments either.
I totally understand that, but they can't do it if they wanted to. The board has to do it.
I understand.
But you can direct staff to look at that, and then we can take that to the appropriate committee.
So that's an excellent point, and I think that we should outside of this, we should make a recommendation. With respect to whether you need additional information to be able to make a decision,
No, I'm fine.
No, I'm good.
down this side?
I'm good.
I'm fine.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page with that. So with that, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Commissioner Kern, second, Commissioner Augustiniak. We don't need a roll call vote on that, do we? No. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, public hearing is now closed. Thank you very much. Okay, so further deliberation on this point. We have 5 points potentially in a motion to consider here. One would be site plan approval. And actually, Stephanie, if we could go through the findings of fact here, but we have 5 points: site plan approval, special use, setback, height, and floor area ratio. So on those.
Well, there's just 2 votes, so you have your site plan and your special use. Your special use encompasses those exceptions.
Right. My point was that there's 5 points here, and again, I just want to get a sense from the commissioners about, as I view it, I don't see any of these as being separable, right? They're all part and parcel. I don't think that, unlike some other things we've considered, I don't think that these are separable. I don't think it would make sense for us to separate these as we've done others recently. So before we entertain a motion, is there any further discussion or deliberation among the commissioners?
I just have one point. The last one, number 4, an exception to ordinance 2000-0-006 to allow multifamily structures where condominiums is specified.
That was an error in the staff report. We let you know that we re-uploaded the correct report on the website within 30 minutes of discovering the error and provided.
This is the only one I got. I get mine mailed, so I don't.
We sent it out via
So is that
email.
taken off of there?
Correct.
I'm not asking you to make that condition. Exception, excuse me.
It speaks to that word of exception versus deviation.
Where's, do you have a copy of the motion to consider? Barb, do you have one that I could see? Because I obviously don't have one.
Right, on yours.
I got it. Thank you. No. No. It's not what I'm saying. Do you need a moment there?
No, I'm fine now. Mine had this one on there, and it's something I talked to Tony
Oh, yeah,
about.
because they came in 2 separate emails.
Yeah, but I get my mail, so I
Oh.
don't do the emails, so, okay, all right. Okay.
Okay.
So we want to make sure those findings are entered into the record.
Yes.
Before you make a motion, there are different findings to standards.
So within the staff report, we do have the standards for special use, and we have findings of fact. Are there any additions or questions on those from the commission?
And just to be clear, there are standards for PUDs, there are standards for residential PUDs, there are standards for site plan, and there are standards for special uses. So it's quite voluminous. Some of them are kind of redundant, repetitive. The standards for the PUD are often reflected when you're creating new PUDs, but just to be thorough, we went ahead and included those. Most of those, you can see, are not applicable to a substantial deviation. Probably the most critical ones are the special use standards and the site plan standards.
Well, okay, just so that we can get to the heart of this here, again, speaking about the setback, I'll toss it out myself. Obviously, we have overlapping, conflicting setback requirements, and to that end, outside of this, I think it would be important for us to consider, especially with that undeveloped commercial space in the middle, that we kind of, any undeveloped space that falls within this with conflicting setbacks, that we clarify this point. If there's some change that we need to make before the next development comes up, we should do it. So,
Well, the commercial wouldn't be because it's commercial. The UDO does apply to commercial.
okay, so, but you understand the point,
It would
right?
need to comply with UDO specifically.
Okay, so,
Urban overlay district.
okay, yeah. So, do any of the commissioners have any concerns about the setback aspect of this?
No.
Okay. Height? So we have, and floor area ratio. All right, so if there are no other questions or comments from the commissioners, I would entertain a motion on this matter.
It's a long motion.
In the interest of getting everyone out of here this evening, finishing this matter, or is there anyone going to entertain a motion? I mean, make a motion on this. All right, given that no one's looking to make a motion, are there any other questions? Because
if I could get the hard
can't hold these
copy,
folks
I'll
out.
do it.
Yeah, here.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
It's just a long one.
Okay.
All right. Make a motion to grant the petitioner Andrew Crowley of Griffin Gallagher LLC on behalf of Carly Mayer and KJM Vandenberg Brookside joint venture site plan approval in accordance with the plans as noted in the list of submitted plans within the staff report and attached to the Plan Commission meeting packet, develop a 144-unit multifamily residential project with 4 residential structures connected by semi-underground parking. The proposed plans includes various private residential amenities such as 5,320 square foot clubhouse, outdoor terraces, outdoor pool and cabanas, electric car charging stations, a dog park, fitness center, fire pits, and landscaping. The Plan Commission also moves to recommend that the Village Board grant the petitioner Andrea Crowley of Griffin and Gallagher LLC on behalf of Carly Mayer and KJM Vandenberg Brookside joint venture a special use permit for substantial deviation from the Brookside Glen planned unit development within ordinance 2000-006 to develop a 144-unit multifamily residential project within 4 residential structures connected by semi-underground parking. Ordinance 2000-006 allows 144 dwelling units within 9 buildings. Proposed substantial deviation will reduce the number of residential structures from 9 to 4. The clubhouse will be located between the residential structures above the semi-underground parking garage. The subject property is generally located west of Magnuson Lane and John Michael Drive in the southwest corner of 191st Street and Magnuson Lane. The parcel identification number of lots are 190911 200 015 0000 and 190911 200 013 0000. The Plan Commission also adopts the standards for a planned unit development, standards for site plan approval, and findings of fact for a special use permit drafted in the staff report and discussed at this meeting. The project includes the following exceptions. 1, an exception to the village requirement for the front yard setback to allow the residential structures to be set back about 18 feet to 27 feet. 2, a 9-foot exception to the maximum building height requirement within ordinance 2000-006 to allow the structures at a building height of 65 feet or 56 feet is the maximum height allowed. And 3, an exception of .056 to the village requirement for floor area ratio to allow a floor area ratio of .656, where .6 is the maximum floor area ratio allowed. The Plan Commission recommends the following conditions: that the final landscape plan must be approved by the village landscape architect and village staff prior to release of the building permit. 2, that the petitioner provides amenities in accordance with the plans. 3, all proposed residential amenities must be completed prior to issue of final certificate of occupancy. 4, the public improvements, sidewalk lighting, street trees, and intersection improvements along Magnuson Lane towards 191st Street must be completed prior to issuance of the final certificate of occupancy.
Okay, so we have, thank you.
that's it.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Curran. Before we move to a vote, with respect to any other conditions, there were none discussed. Are there any now to be amended to the motion? Hearing none, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Augustiniak,
Nay.
Gatto,
Yes.
Manny,
No.
Engel,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Croner,
No.
Shaw.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Hope you guys want to move there.
It just made Tinley a worse place to live.
$30,000 in home value. Thank you very much.
Don't run for office.
$30,000 in home value.
It's not
We help you. I have the
So,
same problem. I
the
can
next item on the agenda is good of the order. We have
Couple items. At our next agenda, we have another large project coming up, and that's South Street Boulevard. So right now, it's tentatively set for that agenda. We still have a lot of work to do.
Maybe I can ride on the bus with the mayor.
I can wait. I think you want me to wait until...
You know, if you want to wait, I just got one thing. I'd like to, seeing how that motion passed, I would like to put forth a motion, if we can, recommending to the board that staff looks at those stop signs at that intersection that gentleman referenced, because, guys, we're going to have a problem there.
I think in general, that's a great idea, and also the traffic concerns that they had about the intersection.
You did address nothing.
Yeah, but here's the issue. Those intersections, that's a county road. I'm talking about a simple subdivision intersection.
Did nothing.
We need four-way stops there, and we need them there before this thing starts.
So I mean, we certainly could make a recommendation directly to the board, but I think the more
The
appropriate...
channel is to go to...
The Public Safety Committee?
Public Safety Committee.
Which is,
You have
so
to
however
do
we do that. All I want to, just get it. if
Yeah,
we can get it
make a
done.
motion.
Yeah, so
Let's do a
make a
formal,
motion
make the
that
motion.
we-
Make a motion that this goes before the Public Safety Committee meeting on the very next meeting to install stop signs at
You have to do something.
the intersection of,
Recommendation.
I'm sorry?
Just change the name.
Magnolia, and then John Michael.
Yeah, and nothing gets done in time.
Magnolia and John Michael.
Generally, the intersections in that general vicinity, is that fair?
So that we stop the bypass of the major arteries.
Okay, do I have a second on that
Second.
motion?
Second.
Commissioner Manny, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion
Paula,
carries.
Paula, we just made the motion pass unanimously for this, just letting you know. Okay. If you guys can get that rolling.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay,
So
so,
Boulevard's
again, getting
coming
back
up.
on
The
track.
agenda of Woodman's, we're still waiting for a plan. You know, we had some preliminary meetings. We actually had a meeting set up and then it canceled at the last minute. But I think that's imminent, coming up. I hope everybody completed the survey that was on our website for the plaza downtown. We're closing that on November 6th. We're working at a meeting just this week with Lakota. we're looking at open house on December 6th. So we're working through the various location proposals as well as the amenities. What we're going to harvest from that survey is what kind of amenities the community is looking for in the plaza. Then that'll start to take shape and look and configurations of that plaza itself. We have a proposal in for McDonald's. I think Stephanie might have mentioned this last time. You know, similar to the other McDonald's in Harlem. Everybody's going for the 2 lanes. We have some legacy code updates. That'll be fun again. We have a CD committee on November 14th. So similar to the public safety committee, this is the appropriate path for looking at those kinds of things. So we'll take it to them first. We have several items on that agenda, and depending on how much we get done before then, we're going to be looking at several things to clean up the legacy code, some inconsistencies that we found. The mayor has an initiative right now looking at different economic development programs for the downtown area. We call it our playbook. Patrick Hoban's been working closely with the mayor on this, so there's going to be some, we already have the facade improvement program. We're going to look to expand the programs to look at assistance for permanent improvements that bring these older buildings into code compliance. So that could address sprinklers, fire alarms, ADA compliance, or just general code issues. So all those things, the idea, because it's in a TIF, we're looking to improve the EAV on those buildings, which in turn pay back into the TIF district. And as part of that, we're working on design guidelines, because for a facade improvement program, which we already have one, but it's difficult to administer that when we don't have design guidelines to help guide, you know, the review of these architectural proposals. So we're working on that. Personally, one of my most important projects right now is to get a software update to our department. We are really encumbered with respect to efficiencies, and working with the staffing levels that we have now, we have to improve our efficiencies, and the best way to do that is through better software. So that is probably my most important project. And so I don't know if you had any others.
I just had an update. The Aldi sign, if you go by there currently, they've actually framed out for the sign size that you recommended. So if you want to get a glimpse of what that might look like, they've not put in a sign, they've just left the gap for the signs. I told them they could do that at their own risk because they've not gotten approval for any particular size sign at this point. They'll be going to Village Board on Tuesday.
They framed it out for the size that we recommended?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, for the medium size.
The medium size
the
one.
120 square foot main sign. And they finished the facade work around that too, so it looks pretty complete other than the gap where the sign will go. And they're looking to
Yeah, we're looking.
get their approval.
Yeah, we're asking to have first reading waived on that because they have a ribbon cutting coming up after that. So I've gotten support with our trustee Glotz to look for a waiving of the first reading and go directly to approval for that project.
And in the same neck of the woods, Paula mentioned McDonald's at that same shopping center will be coming to you in the coming months, depending on when we get plans back from them. We've given them our staff comments, and their task is to address those comments and give us the next set of plans so we can bring it to you all. Also in that same shopping center, you'll see that Portillo's is beginning their work, and the drive-thru was still open today when I went by, but
They work at night.
yeah, they're going to be working at night, and so it's nice to see some of these projects moving along. The other McDonald's location that you guys already approved earlier this year, they have submitted for building permit, and I believe they're in the building permit stage of getting revised plans back as well. So they'll be moving along soon too, hopefully.
Great. So that's everything from staff? Okay, so I appreciate that, and I apologize for now. I'm going to go back out of order again. I'd like to ask the village attorney, given a somewhat split vote here this evening, but it was obviously a close vote. I've reviewed the Plan Commission ordinances for many different towns around, and I think it's Oak Lawn, which I know you're familiar with, has a mechanism in there. Yeah, I wanted to get
A mechanism for what?
Your thoughts on that, when there's a minority?
To give reasons why they voted no? Is that what
No,
you're saying?
just-
Oh, from that part of the, not just the vote, yeah. The, you know, those, I don't want to go, God, I looked at it a while, but there is some
I didn't mean to put you on the
mechanism.
spot.
No, there is some mechanism whereby, you know, plan commission members who vote in opposition to something that ultimately gets recommended can come speak on it. More than that, that's what we're talking about. I don't know the triggers and what time they get, but.
It's just a protocol. I mean, I've done that with planning commissions,
Yes.
where actually the dissenting vote might want to explain why they voted
They
that,
might
but
be
it's
able
not a
to put something
requirement.
written even, I'd have to look back.
Yeah,
at it, but there's-
so I wanted to bring that up because in these types of things, when there is not a clear consensus among commissioners, that might be an important context to bring to the village board as they consider it, and they're not just simply looking at, a vote.
Yeah, I actually, it's been a practice in many of the communities I've been in. I wouldn't want the commission to feel forced, I guess, to do that. I don't think there's anything, even in our code now, that requires a commissioner to explain, but I think it's a good practice and certainly helps give direction, because it could be voting no for different reasons,
Right.
so.
And I believe there was another element to it where there is not a certain percentage majority that something can't go to the next village board meeting.
Yeah, it's gotta be, that one I know, I wrote that. It's gotta be unanimous, gets them to the next meeting. If it's
Right.
not unanimous, you can't go to the next meeting, you have to make it,
Oh, really?
But this one's not going to your next meeting, their next meeting, this will be.
We usually have a meeting in between anyway.
Right.
I think the rationale behind that is so that you can get the minutes,
Right.
so the board can see
Right.
the minutes of what you guys did and what you discussed, and I think that if you assume it's unanimous, then, okay, the minutes are not yet, the minutes have to be ready, but even not yet approved, so that's what that's at.
Yeah. So my
We
point of
have
bringing
time.
that up is, hopefully, over time, we can have very few petitions where we don't get a unanimous vote or a clear consensus. But in these kind of cases, I just kind of want to bring it up for everyone to consider whether that might be something we would look at down the road.
Let me just add on that. I'll share with you the goods and the bads, my opinion. I think you guys did a great job of getting the developer to finally to sit down, shut up, and work with the residents of that area. They came up with a very good plan. Was the plan perfect? No. But what hurt, why I voted against them, there were a few reasons. Number one, she committed to one thing again, just like she did the first time she came in here, or they did, and they didn't abide by it. And then secondly, and more importantly, is the residents' concern about home values. The study that we were given, and wasn't even given to this plan commission, which I find really interesting that we're, go ahead.
It was in the last packet.
Again, I didn't get it in my packet in May, but I got it in the house, so.
The packet on the 19th for the workshop, it was in there.
The, Tracy crossed the entire study, the full one? Okay, and I'll take that
It
back.
was 400 pages, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have a huge packet.
But here was my issue on that, is that all the questions that were brought up by the prior plan commission, poking holes in their, both from the residents and the plan commission, poking holes in the study, were never addressed by the petitioners here. And I've got a problem with that, because those residents are going to be sitting out there with that building, and I think it was, if that was done, if I paid for that, if I commissioned that report, I'd send it right back to them, I'd say, I'm not paying this because this is not a complete report, especially after Mr. Cross was here, and I mean, I think just about everybody in the plan commission poked holes in what his thoughts were, so that's why I voted against it. I think we need something, and we're not going to stop progress from building there. And I think overall it was a pretty good plan, but I still think that I had concerns about the residents concerned about home values. I had concerns about, once again, the developer committing to something and not following through on it. Those are my two big issues. But I will say this, I mean it when I say I compliment you guys. You answered every one of the questions, whether it was a good answer that the residents wanted to hear or not. It was the best answer that we could give, and I applaud you for that.
Well,
thought you
I
did a
shamelessly
great job.
took some credit for that, but that's all them.
Yeah,
They
so-
did it all.
Yeah, this issue on here, and we'll just have to talk later, I think you're misinterpreting this, but that's just my opinion, and you have your opinion. I
Yeah.
think you're misinterpreting. There was no resistance on their part to not to give you what you wanted. So, I mean, that's a
Just
strong...
give you my opinion.
Yeah.
My opinion. I'm not saying who's right or who's wrong.
That's why
I'm just
that
giving my
line was
opinion.
sitting up here. Yes,
Exactly.
that's right.
Exactly.
So, I appreciate that.
So, I mean, you wanted a little bit of explanation on both. That was my biggest thing. I think the study was flawed. I don't think it was ever corrected properly. And I have a problem because in previous submissions and in front of public hearings here to this commission, they've made commitments that they didn't live by, or
But
they...
you're approving or not approving, and I'm probably really stepping where I shouldn't go, but your vote is really approving or not approving the project. You certainly have the right to have...
You're asking, wait, I hear you,
Yeah.
but I voted against it, and I'm telling you why I voted against it.
Okay, I think we've,
Yeah.
I appreciate that, and we've voted, and that matter is now going to the board. So, moving forward, and I don't want to take up any more time from the folks here, we have opportunity for public comment.
The only comment I have is, before you went to the voting process, you had some streamlined, about meeting in the middle. But then again, you didn't even take any of the exceptions that they were asking for, such as height. Okay, I brought an example up for the height. They don't need 14-foot ceilings. But you just went through, approved the whole kit and caboodle without any negotiating back and forth, and taking 2 feet off those 2 floors could have lowered the height 4 feet. We have to live there with a 72-foot building staring down at us, versus we could have had it under 60 or around 65, because I don't go by mean heights. Okay, that's just her speak. Okay, it's 72 foot tall, and the townhouses are sitting right there, same elevation, and everything that they were reporting, like you brought up earlier, was that there's an elevation change between the condos and the town and this project. Well, that's 3 blocks away, and it's not comparing apples to apples. Comparing apples to apples would be the elevation change, or sitting right there with the townhouses and the single-family houses. They're sitting right there, next to this project. So we have a 72-foot building staring down at us, and you guys didn't even talk about any exceptions or negotiating a difference in the height. Whereas you brought up the fact that we don't always agree with what they propose, but you just flat out refused to negotiate. Nobody brought up a point about, well, anybody have a problem with the height? You just boom, 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 vote, approved, goodbye, thank you. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just a comment along with what he said, I mean, that would have been a great compromise, meet somewhere in the middle, somewhere between 200 and 300,000 square feet. It's oversized buildings for that small 7-acre site. The site is garbage. It's oddly configured, and they're trying to max out everything possible. I think they're just trying to blow through and disregard every zoning requirement. That it's 50% greater than the allowable FAR. I mean, you give zoning variances a couple feet here and there, maybe 20%. This is 50% greater. That's huge. And they even told you, our 9-building plan was even bigger at 300,000 square feet. They're like, we don't care what the zoning says. We're just going to build whatever we want. They told you it was 300,000 square feet. It's no disregard for the zoning. And I think the job of everyone here is to make sure the community is developed uniformly in conjunction with the zoning codes. That's an exception or variance, whatever you call it, of 50% greater than the allowable. That's a lot of square feet. 100,000, it's 100,000 square feet greater. That's a big building itself. So.
Do we have any other people who would like to speak? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Motion, Commissioner Augustiniak.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Engel. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought you were going to do the motion. I was waiting for that.
No, I did the other
I
one.
know, I know.
I did the